Hi, and welcome to part two of reading Alexander Graham Bell's Memoir upon the Formation of a Deaf Variety of the Human Race. This is my second live stream on YouTube. We are learning over here. I figured out this is a new captioner for me, so I think I figured out how to get it to not shift around now this time. Um, with the way this one works. So yeah, we are learning over here, and I'm also going to try and pay more attention to making sure that what I'm reading is also available on the screen for those who are reading along with me over here. Um, so yes, last time I totally forgot that there is like a minute delay between what is on YouTube and what I'm doing live for the auto captioner there. So I'm gonna try and make sure also that I remember that this time. And yeah, so last time I did cut myself off, but that was my bad. Oopsie. Um, all you really missed was my outro though, so I was kind of entertained because I was like, I'm gonna play my outro and then I cut off. But we're learning over here, and you'll see it this time, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Um, and everything seemed to play normally on the replay. I didn't change anything, but if there's any issues, let me know and I'll make note of the settings and try and change it all. Um, so yeah, just a quick overview, and I do have a little sticky note, so I'm gonna try not to read from it too much, but I wanted to keep myself more on track this time if I could. Yeah, knocking on wood over here. Okie dokie. Um, So, for my agenda, I'm going to read each chapter or each section again, and then we're going to recap what we read so far as we go, like we did last time. But we're just going to recap as we go for this part. Um, but then we're going to summarize chapter 4 through 6. We're going to summarize the conclusion and the appendix at the end of that. So we're going to summarize 4 through 6 as we go in the conclusion, the appendix, and then summarize it as one unit. And then we're going to do a quick synopsis of the entire book. And so, yeah, and that's basically the plan. But I kind of wish I was as cool as Keith Lee, because then I would do like, I got it, let's try it, let's rate it from 1 to 10. Um, I can rate it already halfway through. Halfway through, I'm rating everything we read so far 0 stars. You know what I'm saying? Um, yeah, Keith Lee is awesome. But yeah, let me know your review of the book. Um, all right. So with that being said, we're about to just get right on into it. Hi, my name is Lexi, also known as and doing business as Deaf Child. In 2022, my company was listed as number 14 Best Louisiana Events Companies and Startups. I have been doing business as Deaf Child since 2013. I have my Bachelor of Science in Music Industry Studies and Business Administration, and deafness runs in my family genetically. Speech is not fully accessible to me. And I've got about 50 certifications in marketing and sales that you can find at noladeafchild.com. So we're going to go ahead and get started here with chapter 4. It is called Families of Deaf Mutes. So obviously we are off to a great start, aren't we? So I'll do a quick disclaimer here at the beginning too. In this book, he does use 2 terms that I do not agree with, and one is going to be deaf mute, and the other is going to be deaf and dumb, and we don't really use either of those. And so in Alexander Graham Bell's time, before all of that, we were just known as deaf, for a long, long time. And then around Alexander, I cannot speak. Around Alexander Graham Bell's time, he fucking, they were calling us deaf and dumb, because that's how they thought of us. And so we were all along just like we're not dumb, and then they started calling us hearing like impaired, and we're like, we're not broken either. So I don't know. but yeah, that's kind of like the history of that. But then we have legal rights under the term, um, like the hearing impaired. But we just most like those who are connected or have awareness of these issues or are connected to deaf culture really just go by deaf or hard of hearing. Um, we really don't do like the whole hearing impaired. And usually people who identify that label, um, they usually don't have a strong support within the deaf community. Typically, they're usually more immersed in the hearing world, which is totally cool. Everybody has a different deaf journey, but that still doesn't change the offensiveness of it. Um, but still, all right, we came here to read the book. I'm sorry, but he uses the deaf and dumb and deaf mute a lot. So I just want to get that out of the way because I'm not going to do this disclaimer every time. I'm going to just keep reading. All right, and so here we go. We're actually going to read now Chapter 4, Families of Deaf Mutes. The reports of the American Asylum, New York, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois institutions show that in each institution, deaf mutes have been received who belong to families containing 5, 6, or even more deaf mutes. And there is abundance of evidence to indicate that such families are very numerous in the United States. In cases where there are 5 or 6 children of one family, deaf and dumb, some of them marry when they grow up, and in many cases they marry persons who belong, like themselves, to families containing several deaf mutes. Thus it happens that we have here and there, scattered over the country, groups of deaf-mute families connected together by blood and marriage. The probability is very strong that the deaf-mute children of deaf-mute marriages will at some time or other make their appearance in the educational institutions of the country, and we might reasonably hope to be able to trace the family relations from the published reports of the institutions. Unfortunately, in the majority of cases, the information that can be gleaned in this way is very fragmentary and uncertain, for the names of the husbands and wives of the pupils are rarely quoted, so that it is impossible in the great majority of cases to trace the connections. A female deaf-mute, when she marries, changes her name to that of her husband. The new name is not recorded in the institution reports, and we lose track of her branch of the family. Should she have deaf offspring, they make their appearance in the institution under another family name, and the connection is not obvious. So far as my researches have gone, they indicate the probability of a new connection by blood or marriage between many of the largest of the deaf-mute families of the New England states. In the following diagram, I exhibit the results of an attempt to trace the connections of the Brown family of, I think that's Henniker, New Hampshire, but I don't know for sure, in which there are known to be at least 4 generations of deaf mutes. Jesus. So it's a type of, I don't know the name of this type or how to accurately really describe this type of family tree, but it's a type of family tree, um, and it's color coded with either a white circle or a black circle, um, and it shows marriages as well as deaf people and hearing people. And then it goes on to say, this is, yeah. Um, the Brown family of Henniker, New Hampshire. I think that's Henniker, New Hampshire. I'm not sure. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. The ancestor of this family was one of the early pioneers of New Hampshire. He left Stowe in Massachusetts somewhere about the year 1787 and settled in Henniker, New Hampshire. I don't know if I'm saying either of those towns right. And who really cares, right? Like, it's a colonized name anyway. The more important the more important question, what is the actual name of that land? You know what I'm saying? Like the native name. That's the more important question. Okay. I live in Bulbancha. Bulbancha. I feel like I had to spell that. I just realized the captioner didn't get it. I said um that Bulbancha is the native land that I live on. All right. I apologize. We're gonna keep going. But his deaf mute son knew him. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Who gives a shit? Born in 1772, married a hearing lady by whom he had a son and daughter, both deaf and dumb. His son Thomas, when he entered the American asylum as a pupil, was recorded to have had an aunt and two cousins deaf and dumb. This branch of the family has not yet been certainly identified. Thomas married a deaf mute, Mary Smith of Chilmark, Massachusetts, by whom he had two children, Thomas L., a deaf mute, and a hearing daughter who died young. Okay, I gotta stop here. We're gonna go on a tangent real quick. Chilmark, Massachusetts is one of the first like little areas for deaf people that with the formation of American Sign Languages, one of the original like little deaf hubs where a lot of deaf people kind of thrived. Well, I should say like mostly white deaf, I don't know. But yeah, so he fucking I had a point. I'm getting a little sidetracked. You know what? Maybe today wasn't the best day to do this live because I am a little tired. All right, we're going to keep going. You know what? No. We're going to stay on this little side tangent real quick. Oh, yeah. So, Chilmark, Massachusetts. If you go to look up Chilmark Marketing Agency, they actually tell the story of Chilmark, Massachusetts that I can't even really remember. So, but they are a deaf owned marketing agency also. Check them out. Chilmark, Chilmark Marketing Agency, deaf owned. Dozanu, Dozanu, another deaf owned marketing agency. Definitely give them love. But the Chilmark one was how I got here. Um, and we're going to keep reading now. And this is what it's like reading a book with me. Okie dokie. The son, Thomas L., married a hearing lady, Almira G. Hart of Burlington, Vermont, and removed to Michigan, where he became one of the teachers of the Michigan Institution of the Deaf and Dumb. Oh my god. I accidentally said of, but the word for is there. Does that matter? Okay. I have no information concerning his descendants. Good fucking stalker. Um, the deaf-mute daughter of Nahum, I don't know if I'm saying that right. That is an interesting name. Married a hearing gentleman, Mr. Bella M. Sweat of Henniker, New Hampshire, by whom she had three sons, Thomas B., William B., and Nahum. The eldest son, Thomas, was born deaf. The second, I lost my place. I apologize. We're going to reread this. The eldest son, Thomas, was born deaf. The second one, William, was born deaf in one ear and lost the hearing of the other in childhood from measles. And the third son, Nahum, could hear. I'm going to pause real quick, going on another side tangent. I'm having a lot of people tell me that I'm not actually deaf because I'm only deaf in one ear. First of all, I'm only completely well, I still hear a little bit of low frequencies, but I can't hear any form of speech in my left ear at all. And my right ear, I missed a third of the ABCs. You don't know how much I hear in my right ear. Just because I hear some in my right ear doesn't mean I hear everything in my right ear. But we're gonna keep going. But a lot of like this whole thing is wrong. But like this whole document says there's a lot wrong here. But we're gonna keep going. Because I could keep getting sidetracked all day, so I need to read the damn thing. But fuck these people. It's hard to keep reading people that suck ass. You know what I mean? It's hard to stay on track when you're just so angry about these stupid ass bitches. That's probably, I've been learning that that's probably like ableist thing to say. One of those things where I still gotta work on my own language, but we're becoming aware. First part is bringing your attention to it, and then the second part, the more your attention's on it, then the more you can fix it. I literally have 3 drinks right now. I got Sprite, I've got tea, and I've got water. What are you guys drinking? Um, all right. I said, what are you guys drinking? Not whatever. Anywho, keeping going. The eldest son, Thomas, married. Wait a minute. Oh, no. Okay, we're still talking about the same kid. Dude, I thought that they named 2 kids Thomas for a second. I was like, damn, really? All right. No, no, no. They're talking about the same one, though. All right. The eldest son, Thomas, married a deaf mute, and his 3 children, Mitchell, Charlotte E., and Mary S., are deaf mutes. The second one, William, married a deaf mute, Margaret Harrington, by whom he had 5 children, all of whom he could hear at birth, but 2 of them, I think that's pronounced Persis, the second, and Lucy Maria, lost their hearing so early in life as to necessitate their education in institutions for the deaf and dumb. 2 others died young, and one has retained her hearing into adult life. The eldest daughter, Persis, born 1852, has married a deaf mute. It will thus be seen that 3 families of deaf mutes have sprung from Nahum Brown, and in 2 of these, the deafness has descended to the 4th generation. In the other family, it descended to the 3rd generation, beyond which I have been unable to trace the family. Good. The deaf-mute connections of the Brown family have only been partially worked out. The wife of William B. Swett was Margaret Harrington, who had a deaf-mute brother, Patrick, who married a deaf-mute Sarah Worcester, don't know if I'm saying that right, who had a twin deaf-mute brother, Frank, who married a deaf-mute Almira Huntington, who had a deaf-mute sister, Sophia M., who married a deaf-mute James R. Hines. Frank Rochester, one of the deaf twin mutes, has a deaf-mute son. The other twin, Susan, has a child who hears. On the other side of the family, the wife of Thomas Brown, Mary Smith of Chilmark, Martha's Vineyard, had a hearing brother, Captain Austin Smith, who had 2 deaf-mute children, a son and a daughter. The son, Freeman N., married a deaf-mute that died. I'm not sure I can say that name right. I apologize. Didama West. Close enough. Mrs. Brown also had a deaf-mute sister, Sally, who married a hearing man of Martha's Vineyard, Harriet Mayhew, who had 5 deaf-mute brothers and sisters. And I have done some videos before on Martha's Vineyard as well. And if I can remember, I will link those in either the description or the comments. I was waiting a second because and I just realized that this auto captioner that I have seems to be behind. But when I did the replay, my captions on the YouTube video seemed to be working for me. So I am hoping that it does work live, but somebody let me know if the YouTube captions does not work live for you. Um, the reason I'm keeping both, even though I have the YouTube live on, is every now and then the YouTube caption will be wrong. And even though this auto captioner doesn't always like show everything I say or get things wrong, somehow when the YouTube captioner would be wrong, every now and then that would be right. And sometimes they were both wrong, but there would be common deaf um, auto captioner issues. So I feel like everybody would still know what I'm talking about, or it would be things that I've already said, so they would know like the context and everything. Um, but yeah, on that point also, if there's ever any issues with not knowing of anything I ever said, y'all always feel free to ask. I'll tell you as soon as possible. I try to make everything accessible. And when I get more funds, I will be able to, you know, not only as I learn more sign language, sign better and everything, but also hire an interpreter. Um, but life is hard. All right, we're going to keep reading. Apologies. You know, I'm not going to apologize for the side tangents. They're just going to happen. But I appreciate you being here, and thank you so much. Okay, we're going to keep going. So, and, I was going to go on another side tangent real quick. I apologize. But, I was just going to say, like, sometimes, whenever I go to live, so I kind of feel like I want to support people, but I also feel like, especially if you're on TikTok and they know that it's you in there versus when you're like on another platform and they can only see like how many viewers there are, not who the viewer is unless you comment. Um, but like, yeah, sometimes, you just want to zone out and space out and watch something. You don't want to actually have to put work in. I totally get that too. So for all of you who view my videos, even if you don't interact, it still means a lot to me. Um, and yeah, like I don't expect this to be like um work or anything. So you're not expected to engage with me, but when you do, I appreciate it. Usually. Just kidding. No, I'm not. But okay, we're gonna keep going for real now. The Lovejoy family. This is another New England family in which deafness has been handed down through 4 generations. Benjamin Lovejoy, a deaf mute of Sydney, I think that's Maine, of Sydney, Maine, is recorded in the reports of the American Asylum to have had a grandfather, father, and 3 children, deaf and dumb. There are other families of deaf mutes of the same name which are obviously connected. I really cannot pronounce this one. I'm just going to call it, is this the Oat family of Illinois? It's spelled O-U-H-E. It's interesting. 2 members of this family entered the Illinois institution in 1859 and 1862. It is recorded of them in 1882 report that there had been deafness in the family for 5 generations. No particulars, however, are given. And then it shows another family tree. And it shows again whether or not it's a deaf person, hearing person, and who is married. And then it says, the Hongland, I think that says, that's either an O or, no, that isn't O. That's either an A or an N. I think it says, it's either the Hoagland or the Hongland. I really cannot tell. Family of Kentucky. This is one of the most remarkable of the deaf mute families of America. In the above diagram, I have attempted to show the family connections so far as they are known to me. In 1853, this family was stated to consist of a father, himself deaf and dumb, with 7 deaf-mute children. He had 2 deaf-mute nephews, one of whom was married and had 2 deaf-mute children. He had also had a hearing sister who had 2 deaf-mute sons, one of whom had 3 children, all deaf-mutes. The principal of the Kentucky institution has kindly furnished with me the following additional particulars concerning this family. He says, in 1822, two brothers, Thomas and William Hoagland, entered our institution. Thomas never married, but William married a deaf mute. He had a son and two daughters, all of whom were mute and married mutes. Jesse, the son, has 5 children, all of whom can hear. Mrs. I think this is Blunt, but it's spelled Blount. I'm gonna stop spelling it, but yeah, fuck. The eldest daughter has one son, a mute. Clara, the other daughter, is childless. Good for her. This may be called the Lexington branch, as their home was there. Another, the Gallatin County branch, contained 7 deaf mutes. And another branch, the Reeds, the father and his 3 children are mutes. Only a part of all 3 mutes have been at school, and it is difficult to trace. There's just like a U there. Or is that a U? Huh. It is difficult to trace the scanty records that. Yeah, I don't know, because it's like I swear, dude, it's literally just like a random N, and this sentence doesn't make sense to me, but my bad. I'm gonna try reading it again. Okay. Only a part of all these mutes have been at school, and it is difficult to trace the scanty records, the exact relationship between the different branches. Or is it the scanty records the exact relationship between the different branches? I don't know. All right, keeping going. The Atkins family of Kentucky. This family was stated in 1853 to contain 9 deaf mutes. I'm gonna pause real quick for like a side tangent. Why the fuck is this fucking captioner like getting delayed and shit and skipping shit though? Because I feel like I'm going real fucking slow. Alright, gonna keep going. The Grissom family of Kentucky. I am indebted to the principal of the Kentucky institution for the following very instructive particulars concerning this family. There are 3 or 4 deaf-mute brothers and sisters of this family who were pupils here, Kentucky Institution, about the year 1828. One of them, William, married a deaf-mute lady and had a numerous family, all of whom could hear. One of his is that a Sioux? Sons. Damn. I'm thinking of sous chef. My bad. I've worked in the kitchen too long. And technically never really worked in the kitchen or at a restaurant. I was a server, but you know. Okay. One of his sons, I cannot speak. One of his sons married his cousin, also a hearing person, and all of their 5 children are deaf mutes. Wait a minute. One of his sons married his cousin? God. You didn't have to. You could have taken that to the grave. You didn't have to publish that about him. But okay. In 1870, Mr. Benjamin Talbot then, damn, I'm still on that. That's fucked up. All right, I'm gonna try to keep going. In 1870, Mr. Benjamin Talbot, then principal of the Iowa Institution, published in the American Annuals of the Deaf and Dumb, volume 15, page 118, an account of some families of deaf mutes residing in his state. 1 or 2 of the most remarkable cases may be noted, which are of a particularly suggestive character. And then it shows another family tree, who are the hearing and deaf people, but it just shows like one family, and it doesn't show marriages, just the father and his kids. And then it says the Lerber family of Iowa. The father is a deaf mute without education who came to Iowa from Indiana, where there are, or have been, several deaf mute relatives. Of 12 children in this family, only one, and the 8th, was born deaf. Four others, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and ninth, have lost their hearing in whole or in part and have been sent to school here, Iowa institution. And then it shows another family tree with the hearing person, and it shows partially deaf and then deaf mute and indicates marriage. Maybe they didn't have a term for hard of hearing, but to me, hard of hearing is deaf. Deafness is a spectrum, and if you're hard of hearing, you're deaf too. So, that brings me back to what I was saying earlier. I'm so tired of people saying that I'm not deaf just because I'm hard of hearing. Hard of hearing is deaf too. And, you can suck my fucking dick. Alright, we're gonna keep on going. Um, is that Houston? Or, I don't know. The Houston family of Iowa. Yeah, that's Houston. I'm having a great day. The Houston family of Iowa. There have been 10 children in this family, of whom the third and eighth lost their hearing by disease, while the sixth, ninth, and 10th were born deaf. Mr. Houston's grandmothers were sisters, and the grandfather and grandmother of his family were first cousins. Why is there so much intermarriage here? Mr. Houston's brothers like himself were healthy and long-lived, but like him, they all became deaf, or at least hard of hearing, comparatively early in life. And then, it just shows another family tree, and all of these people are deaf this time. And the Fullerton family of Hebron, New York. Oh, hitting buttons over here, my bad. I just realized that my YouTube chat was set to top chat instead of live chat, so I went ahead and put that on live chat just in case real quick, because, top chat doesn't show you what's happening in real time. Alright, keeping going. The Fullerton family of Hebron, New York. Sales Works, born 1806, a presumed congenital deaf mute of New York institution, married Jane Fullerton, born 1806, a congenital deaf mute educated in the same institution, who had 6 brothers and sisters, deaf and dumb. All of their children were deaf and dumb. There were thus 14 deaf mutes in this family. I have no information concerning the descendants. And then it shows another family tree, who's hearing, who's deaf, who's married. And then it says, a remarkable family reported from the New York Institution for the Deaf and Dumb. The particulars of this family, as gleaned from the 1854 report of the New York Institution, are shown in the above diagram. As the descent is in the female line, this genealogical table could not have been made had it not been for the fact that the New York report gives the names of the husbands and wives of some of the pupils. Why though? Why the fuck are you keeping records of that shit? Like, I don't fucking understand that. And then it shows another family tree. And it shows like several family trees. It shows like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It shows 12 different family trees. And it shows who's hearing, who's deaf, and who's married. Oh, and on these family trees, they're just showing who's deaf and who's married and who's hearing through symbols. They're not naming all the members in the family in the trees, except for just naming the family name. Okay. And that's for like all of the family trees so far in chapter 4 that I've seen, I think. Okie dokie. And we're going to wrap up chapter 4 right here, I think. Alright, so a group of deaf-mute families from Maine, members of the deaf-mute families shown in Figure 7, have been admitted into the American Asylum at Hartford, Connecticut. There is no record showing any relationship between the families, but their close proximity to one another is extremely suggestive. The fact that there are 4 generations of deaf mutes in the Lovejoy family suggests the idea that some of the other families may perhaps be descended from it through the female line. Whatever that explanation, it is at all events remarkable that so many large deaf-mute families should have originated in small places within a few miles of one another. It must not be supposed that I have attempted to give an exhaustive list of the large deaf-mute families. I have simply given specimen cases to prove that in many different parts of the country, deafness has been transmitted by heredity. There have been many more large families known to me, which are not alluded to above. Okay, so that was the end of this chapter, and while I process that, I just want to say, like, um, what if we just, talk about all this shit, but replace the word deaf with hearing? You know what I'm saying? Like talking all about how, it's at all events remarkable that so many large hearing families should have originated in small places within a few miles of one another. Doesn't that sound fucking ridiculous? It must not be supposed. I've given a list of all hearing families. Why don't you give a list of all hearing families, dipshit? And then, why don't you prove that in many parts of the country, hearing is transmitted by heredity? What? We're all born human beings. Oh my god. I'm gonna just need another minute to process this. Gotta process. Okay. Alright. So, this, yeah. So if you need to, if you haven't, this is definitely one of those things where you need chapters 1 through 3 for that reference. And if you are watching alone here, I would highly recommend, if you want to keep watching along here, if you just pause real quick, go to part 1, and just watch that recap at the end real quick, perhaps. And then come back here and then put it on like 1.5 speed or 2 times speed and catch up and keep watching live. But, or even if you came from part 1, if you didn't come directly from part 1 and you need a refresher, go back, watch the recap on part 1 real quick of chapters 1 through 3 and the introductory remarks of the book. So, setting the stage, he's been talking about how the if there were more families, if there were more deaf people, if deaf people got married and kept having babies, it would be of calamitous results to the world and to their offspring. I said world, not road. World. WORLD. It keeps putting road when I put world, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm deaf. I don't know if it's because I was born in Mississippi. I lived in New Orleans most of my life. And then I was in speech therapy. So between those three things, I feel like I have like a really weird accent because I don't know. I don't even know what the fuck I sound like, but I feel like no one like thinks I sound like I'm from New Orleans or Mississippi. So, you know, um, but yeah, I'm from New Orleans and I was born in Mississippi and I've lived here since I was 12. So, alrighty. But chapter 4 was basically summarizing this. My apologies. Putting that into context is important though. So within that context of him talking about as being like calamitous result to the world, um, fucking now he's making family trees. He's listing us, um, and he's trying to track us and stalk us and see how many of us he can count and trace and all of that. And I just think that is a little creepy. I think, why would you do that? For what reason, Why would you trace family trees like this? Um, and so I'm going to pause real quick on a side tangent. I'm blowing my mind. FamilySearch.org. FamilySearch.org. Oh my god. I'm gonna do a whole, that's a whole nother fucking video. That is a whole, I need to write this down. That's a whole fucking video comparing FamilySearch.org to chapter 4. Or I might do that. Hold on. I think I'm onto something here. I think, I don't know why. I just do. Oh my god. Yes. I had to write that down. Okay. So, in this whole fucking context, calling us like we're calamitous to the world, and he said that we were a defect and things, and that we, we shouldn't be producing. And he also said that it should be warned to deaf people the impropriety of intermarriage. So, you keep in mind those things. Um, fucking, and now he's making family trees of us. What the hell? Ain't that fucking weird and creepy? And, then he fucking ends it. You know what the fuck I mean? And now he put all that into context. And, he's saying, talking about it is remarkable that so many large deaf-mute families should have originated in small places within a few miles of one another. And then he also says, I have simply given specimen cases to prove that in many different parts of the country, deafness has been transmitted by heredity. Yeah. What the hell? How does underground bell? This one deserves that. It deserves that. Yeah. Alright. So we're going to move on to chapter 5 now. Boop. This one, oh, you know what? Did I go back over this title real quick? I apologize. I've been going over this. So chapter 4 again was called Families of Deaf Mutes. Keep that in mind. All right. Moving on to chapter 5 now. For real. Upon the growth of the deaf mute population. The full returns of the 1880 census, so far as regards the deaf and dumb, have not yet been published, but as stated before, Rev. Frederick H. Wines, who had charge of this department of the census, presented to the 10th Convention of American Instructors of the Deaf and Dumb the results of an analysis of 22,472 cases of deaf mutes reported in the census returns. The tables presented by Mr. Wines have been reproduced in the appendix. It will be observed that the cases are classified according to the period when deafness occurred and according to the cause of deafness, whether congenital or not. I have rearranged these cases into decades so as to correspond with the classification of the pupils of the American Asylum and Illinois Institution, and have been represented the results graphically in the following diagram. So yeah, he actually basically just described this diagram way better than what I could, because we are looking at what the fuck he just said we would be looking at. Yep, it's broken down. It's a graph broken down by whether or not you were born deaf and by time period. Okay. Oh, we are increasing for congenital deafness. I love that for us. The ordinates of the curves represent, respectively, the number of congenital and non-congenital deaf mutes who became deaf in the decades indicated by the, I do not know this fucking word, Jesus Christ, what are you? Yep, nah, I can't fucking read that one. Indicated by something. Yep, let's try this sentence from the top. The ordinance of the curves represent, respectively, the number of congenital and non-congenital deaf mutes who became deaf in the decades indicated by the some fucking shit. In the case of the congenital deaf mutes, the ordinance also represent the number who are born deaf in the decades given, but this is not true of the non-congenitals. It will be observed that the number of deaf mutes returned who became deaf in the last decade, 1871 to 1880, is less than the number who became deaf in the preceding decade. This does not necessarily mean that the number actually was less, but more probably indicates that the returns for the last decade are imperfect. Mr. Wine says that in proportion to the degree of their youth, the younger deaf mutes are not enumerated. Fewer deaf mutes who are babes in arms are enumerated than at the age of 3 years, and fewer at 3 than at 7. The apparent maximum at 7 is not the actual maximum. The actual maximum is at some younger age not yet ascertained. In the above diagram, those portions of the curves that are believed to be unreliable from this cause are indicated by dotted lines. Oh, okay, I was wondering about that. It will be observed that among the older deaf mutes, the congenitals are more numerous than the non-congenitals. Whereas among the younger, the reverse appears to be the case. There is no apparent I can't read that word, I apologize. So there was no apparent something in the numbers of the congenitally born deaf-born of late years. Bruh, I tried zooming it in. I don't think it's my bad vision. I still can't read that fucking word, but maybe it's because I don't know it. Okay. We're going to keep going. There is no apparent something in the numbers of the congenitally deaf born of the late years, and the reversal of the relation between the two classes must be attributed to an abnormal increase in the number of those who became deaf from disease or accident. It looks as if a wave of deafness-producing disease had swept over the continent about the time of the late Civil War. Okay, and last time I said deafness wasn't a disease, and okay, yeah, there are diseases that cause deafness, and for people who have diseases and they end up deaf from those diseases, or they're discussing, the cause of their deafness, that's their journey. I respect that, and I am in no way disregarding that. Mad respect. Um, I don't like the idea from this memoir that they portray deafness itself, the entire concept, as a disease, and that is what I meant. So, could word that better, but la vida es dura. Life is hard. All right. And so then it basically shows another graph. It was basically a lot like the last one that we've been describing, and it just shows the difference between the American asylum and the Illinois institution. Let's keep going. There are indications also of a similar, though less, disturbance in the number of those who lost their hearing from disease during the decade 1811 to 1820. An examination of the reports of the American Asylum and Illinois Institution may throw light upon the nature of these disturbances. By classifying the pupils of these institutions according to their period of birth, we obtain the results that are exhibited graphically in the foregoing diagram. The apparent decrease in the number of pupils born in the last 2 decades is susceptible of simple explanation. Very few pupils who are received into institutions for the deaf and dumb before they are 10 or 12 years of age, while it is not uncommon for pupils to be admitted at 20 or 25 years of age or even older. A pupil born in the year 1869 would only be 13 years of age in 1882, the date of the Illinois report. It is evident, therefore, that of those deaf mutes who were born in the decade 1860 to 1869, who will ultimately make their appearance in the Illinois institution, all had not been received at the date of the report. A similar explanation can be given in the cause of the American Asylum. The dotted lines indicate those portions of the curves which are known to be inaccurate on this account. In regard to the American Asylum, the abnormal increase in the number of pupils who became deaf from disease or accident who were born during the decade 1810 to 1819 is very marked. Another abnormal increase is observable in the number of those who became deaf in the decade 1800 to 1869. Indeed, the relations of the congenital and non-congenital deaf mutes who are reversed in a similar manner to that shown in Figure 8. In regard to the Illinois pupils, it will be observed that the increase in the numbers of the non-congenitally deaf is so enormous that of the pupils who were born in the decade 1800 to 1869, there were more than 3 times as many non-congenitally deaf as there were congenitally deaf, and of those born in 1870 to 1879, more than 4 times, whereas the census returns shows that more than half of all the deaf mutes living in this country, 1880, were born deaf. In the reports of the American Asylum and Illinois Institution, the year when each pupil was admitted and his age when admitted are noted, with few exceptions. From these elements, the period of birth has been calculated. The period when hearing was lost has also been ascertained in all cases where the age of the pupil when deafness occurred is stated in the report. In tables K and L of the appendix, the non-congenital pupils of both institutions are classified according to the period when hearing was lost and according to the disease that caused deafness. In regards to the Illinois report, it is unfortunately the case that the age of the pupil when deafness occurred is not stated in 327 cases out of 947, so that we are only able to classify about 2/3 of the cases in this way. The results are shown graphically in the upper diagrams of Figure 10. From the tables in the appendix, we have clear evidence of 2 epidemics of spotted fever, or epidemic cerebrospinal meningitis. One epidemic during the decade 1810 to 1819, reaching a maximum in the year 1815, and the other, a great epidemic, in the decade 1860 to 1869, continuing in the last decade, 1870 to 1879. The pupils who became deaf from cerebrospinal meningitis and from scarlet fever are classified according to the period when deafness occurred in lower diagrams of Figure 10. And just side note, I have no clue how the fuck to say cerebrospinal meningitis. No clue if that's right. I'm just pretending like I'm on Grey's Anatomy over here. Um, the numbers of non-congenitally deaf are evidently subject to great and sudden fluctuations on account of epidemical disease which cause deafness. Is that is epidemical? Okay, I'm sorry. The numbers of the non-congenitally deaf are evidently subject to great and sudden fluctuation on account of epidemical diseases which cause deafness, whereas the growth of the congenitally deaf population seems to be much more regular. In Table T of the Appendix, I have classified 215 cases of deaf mutes who are offspring of deaf mutes according to their period of birth, separating those who have one parent deaf from those who have both. The results are shown graphically in Figure 11. And then it literally shows that a graph, and it shows whether or not they have one or both deaf parents. No deaf mute having both parents deaf has been returned who was born before the year 1832. It seems probable, therefore, that the oldest deaf mute in the country, whose parents were born deaf mutes, is only now a little past middle age. We have, therefore, received into our institutions only the first generation of deaf mutes, born from the intermarriage of deaf mutes. The apparent decrease in the number born since 1861 does not necessarily indicate a real decrease, for many of the deaf mutes born in the decades 1861 to 1870 have not yet been admitted to institutions for the deaf and dumb. Those portions of the curves that we know to be unreliable from this cause are represented in dotted lines. In concluding this portion of my subject, it may be well to institute a comparison between the deaf-mute population and the total population to the country as returned by the census of 1880. That is interesting, considering that is the year you got sign language banned, dipshit. And why the fuck would it be well to compare deaf people to hearing? In Table U of the Appendix, I have classified the people of the United States according to the decades in which they were born, and I have reduced the number born in each decade to a percentage of the whole. In the same table, I have classified the 12, oh my god, in the same table, I have classified the 12,154 congenital deaf mutes mentioned by Mr. Wines in a similar manner, and also the deaf mutes who have both parents deaf mutes. We can thus examine upon the same scale the distribution of the three classes according to age. The results are shown graphically in the diagram, Figure 12. Those ordinates represent the percentage of the whole who are born in the decades indicated by, this is a word I cannot read again, and then a same word of one of the words that I said that I could not read before. By something. The ordinate represents the percentage of the whole who are born in the decades indicated by the something. If we assume that the numerical relation now existing between congenital deaf mutes and hearing persons of the same age approximately represents the proportion of the congenitally deaf to the whole population born at the period when they were born, we have a means of comparing the growth of the congenitally deaf population with that of the population at large. The indications are that the congenital deaf mutes of the country are increasing at a greater rate than the population at large, and the deaf mute children of deaf mutes at a greater rate than the congenital deaf mute population. And this kind of ties right back into when I was kind of saying in part one when I was all like, oh no, like he was doing that whole like, he was kind of like has this idea where it's like, oh God, what are we gonna do? Deaf people are out here just living their lives. They're getting married. They're having kids. What if they keep existing? What if there's just like more of them and shit? Holy fuck, you know. Um. So yeah. All right. Let's keep doing this damn thing. Well, I'm on a roll. Oh, you know what? Oh, no. I forgot to recap. I was going to keep going. Let's recap here. So, chapter 5 is called Upon the Growth of the Deaf Mute Populations. And in chapter 5, he is going through, in chapter he's basically making graphs and he's charting the years and how many people there are. He's going through all the census reports and making a graph according to the population sizes of deaf people. And he's categorizing it by whether or not we were born deaf, by how many deaf people there are in our family, by which institutions we went to, by who we got married to, and things like that. And then he ends this all with saying, and now we need to compare the growth rate. He was basically like, whatever, he was basically like, it looks like deaf population size is growing, so we should compare it to the hearing population just to make sure they're not growing faster than we are. That's basically what he was saying. I'm just kidding. He didn't say just to make sure they're not growing faster than we are, but that's how I feel about the situation, to be honest. Um, and so, yeah, and then comparing that to chapter 4, um, so in chapter 4, this was called Families of the Deaf Mutes. In chapter 4, he's breaking down all the families by family tree. Okay, well then chapter 5, he calls this one Upon the Growth of the Deaf Mute Population. And now he's breaking us all down by charts, by our population charts, and going through census reports. And this is his research on how many deaf people were existing at various times. All right, so you can see my narrative here where he's kind of fear mongering and his research is kind of going towards this whole ideology like, oh God, deaf people fucking live. What the hell? You know? And so yeah. So then now we're gonna move on to chapter 6, which is the last chapter, yes, and then we just gotta do the conclusion and the appendix. Um oh wait, am I passing up chapter 6? Oh no, that was chapter 5. So we did chapter 5. Alright. Now let's go find chapter 6. Oh, I lied. Maybe I thought I was done with chapter 5, but there's still some graphs here. Okay, there's another graph here. It's not labeled. It's labeled by year, but I can't. And there's like a line. But I can't tell what that is supposed to represent, to be honest. But it's like a graph. Um, um, Vertically, the numbers go from 5 to 40, but it's not labeled. Um, And horizontally, it just got 4 columns. I think it's supposed to be a bar graph, but you can't see it perhaps. But there are 3 lines. But it's got 4 columns of date periods by decades. Perhaps this is what he was describing before. Okay. And there's a legend here. So there's another graph. The legend says distribution according to age of the whole population of the United States, of the congenital deaf mute population, and of deaf mutes who are children of deaf mutes. The ordinance of the curves represent the percentage of the whole who were born in the decades indicated by the abscess. Is that abscess? It, it's this. I can read the word this time, but I still can't pronounce it. I still don't know the word. It's spelled Absciss, and then it's that thing where A and E are smushed together and the A is backwards. So I don't know what that's supposed to be. So now this shows, a line and it's got the population of the United States. So maybe this legend applies to the other graph. Okay. I'm assuming that legend applies to all the graphs because this one's got a thinking. Well, it looks like it's possibly, nope. I just double checked because I have this screen kind of minimized to make sure that that's why that wasn't cut off. But this one does have another legend, but it's cut off. All right. Now we got some blank pages. Okay, now we're on to chapter 6. Okay, great. I'm actually kind of relieved because I was like, dude, what if I summarized chapter 5 and then there was more to it? But no, there were just some graphs left. But I think that's what they were describing at the end there. Okie dokie. Moving on, chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called Upon the Causes That Determine the Selection of the Deaf by the Deaf in Marriage. So this one is basically like, why the fuck do deaf people want to marry each other? Imagine treating deaf people like shit the way you do, and then wondering why deaf people want to spend time with one another. That is kind of fucking hilarious to me. Alrighty, let's get this show on the road. In the preceding chapters, I have shown that I am an absolute fucking dipshit who can't get laid. You need to fucking... I'm so sorry, that is not what he said. We're gonna be real now. Okay, let's be real. In the preceding chapters, I have shown that sexual selection is at work among the deaf and dumb, tending to produce a deaf variety of the human race. Those who believe as I do that the production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriages of the deaf with the object of applying a remedy. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. Yeah. Yeah, no, we gotta do a this one deserves a replay. This one deserves a replay. We're gonna read this again. We're gonna process it. This ass fuck really said, I have shown that sexual selection is at work among the deaf and dumb, tending to produce a deaf variety of the human race. You know what's funny that he said that? It's true that deaf people do prefer to fuck each other because who would want to fuck somebody when they're calling you dumb? What who the like you have to have a really intense kink of being shamed. Nothing wrong. I'm not kink shaming. If your kink is to be shamed, good for you. I hope you enjoy that. But otherwise, who the fuck wants to fuck somebody who's calling them dumb? Is this memoir Alexander Graham Bell telling on himself? Did nobody want to fuck him? And what's funny, okay, oh yeah, I got sidetracked from my point. What he said, tending to produce a deaf variety of the human race. His reports show. He literally admitted in part 1, we went over this. He admitted, because we discussed how because there's more hearing people than deaf people, because only 15% of the population is deaf, there's always going to be more hearing people to have more deaf kids. He discussed, and he's already said, that there are more deaf people born to hearing families than there are deaf people born to deaf families. So isn't that counterproductive with this analysis in chapter 6 that the deaf variety of the human race will be produced by deaf people having kids when you've already proven that hearing people have more deaf kids than deaf people do? And then And then he said, and this one is gonna get the buffer replay again too because it's so fucked up for doing it. Don't hate me. I'm trying not to overdo it, but this deserves it. Those who believe, as I do, that the production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriages of the deaf with the object of applying a remedy. What the hell? Alexander Bell. So, in my little recap before that I had given you, at the end of, I think it was either the end of chapter 4 or I think it was the end of chapter 4, when I was telling you what he said in chapters 1 through 3, he basically just put that all in one sentence here. The fact of race of human beings, great calamity to the world, will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriage of death. But this time he added, so that's literally points 1, 2, and 3 that I had hit as to, how he was fear mongering, and now he applied this with the object of applying a remedy. This is menacing. This is fucked up. This is crazy. And this is what underlies all academic and medical discussions of deafness. And this is why, hearing people be like, I've studied deafness. I know more about deafness than you. No. Nope. 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 Because this is what you fucking learned, unless you learned from a deaf person. Um, so yeah. And I mean, obviously you're learning this from a deaf person now, but you know what I mean? Like, hearing people will teach this as accurate as in, like, I'm teaching this as accurate as in this did happen, but I'm not teaching this as an accurate representation of deafness. Versus a hearing person will teach this as a good thing, as an accurate representation of deafness, and AGB was an ally. That's what, you know what I mean? Like, hearing people love AGB versus deaf people mostly hate them. Alright, let's keep going. And also, oh no, before we keep going, applying a remedy. So, with some of the other things he says later, you're going to see why I think he wants to eradicate us entirely, I think, if you haven't seen it already. Because I think the whole thing speaks for itself. Great calamity to the world, let's apply a remedy. Things like that, defective race of human beings. Um, let's examine the causes that lead to them getting married. And so now he's saying let's fix that. And this can be applied to a lot of things. And this underscores how the medical study of deafness is rooted in trying to fix us. And we don't need to be fixed. We're a culture. And it stems from this eradication of AGB starting in 1880 at the Milan Conference, Um, and then applying a remedy, what? Fix what? As this applies to our relationships, to our quality of living, he puts that on everything. And this underscores how not only deaf human rights, but human rights for all disabled people were really cut. And a lot of the ways it was cut were spearheaded from AGB, from either what he did early on in life, or the organizations he were a part of, or people being able to reference his work as legal precedent to make other things happen. Okay. But then he goes on to say, it is a significant fact that before the deaf and dumb were educated, comparatively few of them married, and intermarriage, if it existed at all, was so rare as to be practically unknown. This suggests the thought that the intermarriages of the deaf and dumb have in some way been promoted by our methods of education. When we examine the subject from this point of view, a startling condition of affairs becomes apparent. Pause real quick for some commentary here. So, like I've been discussing, more deaf people are born to hearing people than deaf people. So most deaf people are born to hearing families who, a lot of us were the only deaf people that our hearing families know, things like that. And so a lot of hearing people, they just don't have like any knowledge of the deaf perspective. Um, and so a lot of deaf people then become isolated, and that is what we call dinner table syndrome, which still exists today. They just isolate the deaf person. A lot of them don't learn sign. They force us to speak, and we just don't know what's happening. Well, the thing about forcing us to go to school, yeah, it was traumatizing, and he fucked us all up. But before that, deaf community was very spread for the most part, except for in specific areas like Chilmark or Martha's Vineyard. Chilmark is part of Martha's Vineyard, but whatever. Um, but yeah, so that just provided a place for us to meet. But then he's kind of patting us on the back, patting himself on the back, I mean, because deaf people trauma bonded after they finally started getting together, you know, a little bit more. Trauma, deaf people getting married because we spent time together, that's like a natural thing. Like, do hearing people do that with hearing people, like in hearing schools and public schools and everything? You're just like, yeah, it's because of our schools you've gotten married. Like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things applied to hearing people. You know what I mean? All right, we're going to keep going. Indeed, if we desire to create a deaf variety of the race and were to attempt to devise methods which should compel deaf mutes to marry deaf mutes, we could not invent more complete or efficient methods than those that actually exist and which have arisen entirely different and far higher motives. Let us then consider how we might proceed to form a race of deaf mutes, if we desire so to do, and let us compare the steps of the process with those that have been adopted by philanthropists and others, from the purest and most disinterested motives to ameliorate, I don't know this word, ameliorate the condition of the deaf and dumb. How would we commence? So after basically saying saying we need to apply a remedy to deaf people existing because we are a calamity to the world, now he is saying I have pure and disinterested motives to look at all of the things that allow deaf people to survive. Let that marinate. He's talking about fixing us, getting rid of us, right here. Just putting that out there. Okay, and then he continues. Number one, with such an object in view, would it not be, you know what? I thought about doing the buffer, but I'm not going to right now. I'm so sorry that I just paused for a second. Brain freeze. Gonna keep going. Okie dokie. Number one, with such an objective in view, would it not be of importance to separate deaf mutes from hearing persons as early in life as possible and make them live together in the same place, carefully guarding them from the possibility of making acquaintances among hearing persons of their own age? This is what we do. We take deaf children away from their homes and place them in institutions by the hundred, keeping them there from early childhood to the commencement of adult life. Number two, it would also be of importance to promote social intercourse among them in adult life, so that the boys and girls of former years should meet again as men and women. We might, for instance, hold periodical reunions of former pupils at the institutions. This is again what we do. Indeed, the graduates of our institutions now commonly organize themselves into societies or associations for the promotion of social intercourse in adult life. Societies of deaf mutes are to be found in all large cities and in many of the smaller ones. Rooms are hired in a central locality, which become the rendezvous of the deaf mutes of the neighborhood. After the business of the day is done, the deaf mutes of the city meet together for social intercourse, and on Sundays for public worship. Not only do local societies exist, but there are state associations for promoting social intercourse between the deaf mutes of a state. Periodical conventions are held in different parts of the state, attended by deaf mutes of both sexes. At these meetings, they amuse themselves in various ways. Sometimes they hold fairs, have theatrical representations in dumb show. Does he mean sign language? Spectacular tableau, dancing, etc. I don't even know what he means by all of that, but the way he talks about it just pisses me off. Not only do these state associations exist, but a national association has been formed for the purpose of promoting social intercourse between the scattered deaf mutes of the country. The Second National Convention of Deaf Mutes met only a short time ago in New York and was attended by hundreds of deaf mutes from all parts of the United States. Number 3. Another method calculated to foster class feeling among the deaf and dumb would be to provide them with newspapers and periodicals of their own, which should make a specialty of personals relating to the deaf and dumb. Newspapers that should give full accounts of the deaf-mute conventions and reunions, and keep their readers informed of the movements of deaf-mutes, their marriages, deaths, etc. Quite a number of such newspapers have come into existence, the majority being supported by the educational institutions of the country, with the benevolent object of teaching the deaf mutes the art of printing. These papers, I understand, are generally edited and printed in the institutions under the superintendence of the teachers. It was only natural to include among the items personals concerning former pupils, and that former pupils of the institution should take pleasure in reading them. In addition to the periodicals printed in the institutions, others have appeared edited and managed by adult deaf mutes not connected with any institution. These latter papers became the organs of communication between the adult deaf mutes and were affiliated with the conventions and associations above referred to. Number 4, the methods specified above, while they serve to facilitate social intercourse between adult deaf mutes, do not necessarily prevent them from also associating with hearing persons. As there are 1,500 hearing persons for every one deaf mute, it seems difficult to formulate any plan which would restrict their choice of partners in life to deaf mutes alone or to the hearing members of the deaf mute families. Let us consider how this could be accomplished. What more powerful or efficient means could be found than to teach the deaf mutes to think in a different language than from that of the people at large? This is what we do. In the majority of our institutions for the deaf and dumb, a special language is used in the vehicle of thought, a language as different from English as French or German or Russian. The English language is confined to the schoolroom and is simply taught as a school exercise, much as French and German are taught in the public schools. The deaf mutes think in the gesture language, and English is apt to remain a foreign tongue. They can communicate with hearing persons by writing, but they often write in broken English, as a foreigner would speak. They think in gestures, and often translate into written English with the idioms of the sign language. The constant practice of the sign language interferes with the mastery of the English language, and it is to be feared that comparatively few of the congenitally deaf are able to read books understandingly unless couched in simple language. They are thus in a great measure cut off from our literature. This is another element in forcing them into each other's society. They are able to understand a good deal of what they see in our daily newspapers, especially if it concerns what interests them personally. But the political speeches of the day, the leading editorials, etc., are often beyond their knowledge of the English language. Your inability to teach is okay is not connected to deaf people's ability to learn. And this whole idea that deaf people, um, like don't like understand like English if we learn like sign language is bullshit. He goes on. Number 5. Another method of consolidating the deaf and dumb into a distinct class in the community would be to reduce the sign language to writing, so that the deaf mutes would have a common literature distinct from the rest of the world. Such a species of writing would constitute a form of ideography like the Egyptian hieroglyphs. I don't know what the term ideography means, but I really feel like he's calling hieroglyphics. Did I say hieroglyphs glass instead of hieroglyphics? I don't know what the fuck I'm saying, y'all. Okay, I'm sorry. Hieroglyphics. I can't read, I can't speak, I cannot today. Okay. So, this dipshit literally, is he, I don't know what the term ideography means. Let's Google ideography. Okay, it just means the representation of ideas by graphic symbols is the definition. Oh, I got a little scratchy throat and stuff like that right now because there's a lot of pollen in the air, and I am allergic to pollen, and I did not take any Claritin. Okay. He is not calling the Egyptian hieroglyphics stupid. I am just stupid. Just kidding. Alright, we're going to keep going. This, I understand, has already been accomplished by the late Mr. George Hutton of Ireland, afterwards principal of the Institution for the Deaf and Dumb in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The full publication of his method was prevented by his premature death, but a committee was appointed by the Indianapolis Convention of American Instructors of the Deaf and Dumb to act in conjunction with his successor and son, Mr. J. Scott Hutton, to attempt to the recovery of the system from the posthumous papers of Mr. George Hutton. I have not yet seen the report of the committee. Number 6. Another very powerful method of obstructing intercourse with hearing persons and compelling deaf mutes to associate exclusively with one another would be to disseminate throughout the community incorrect ideas concerning the deaf and dumb, so that people should avoid and even fear them. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. So we're going to harp on this for a second because this is why deaf representation is so important. So the idea for hearing people to represent deaf people, a lot of this comes from Alexander Graham Bell's, setting precedent for all of this. So he's literally saying item number 6, for his memoir, he is saying like that we need to spread misinformation. Take note. He's writing the plan. So that is, it's a big part in why and how it's normalized for hearing people to control deaf content because of they've oppressed us for so long. So think about that. And that is why, deaf people get so upset when hearing people try to represent us. Item number 6. It's been the case. And this is the information and what has been passed on throughout the generations in the ideologies and the way that hearing people treat deaf people. So even when I say a hearing person, says they're a deaf ally or that they work for deaf people or blah, 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 they're a coda, blah, blah, blah. If they're unless they're actually having a good conversation with me about life experiences, that's different. But if they're coming at me to be a token or to um oh, I'm just realizing the captioners didn't get it. I said it's one thing to share a life experience with me, that's a good thing, versus to be a token or to discriminate or to try and oppress or use your proximity to deafness to be a dick. That's when I'm gonna go off. All right, we're gonna try to keep going, and then I'm gonna try and hold my thoughts because otherwise we'll be here all day, and then I'm gonna try to summarize my thoughts in just a second. But then he says, the growth of erroneous ideas is favored by collecting deaf mutes into institutions away from public observation. People rarely see a deaf mute, and their information concerning them is chiefly derived from books and periodicals. Okay, hold on. So, keep in mind, he's these are things saying that he does. These are the things saying what would like these are the things he's already talking about what they've been doing. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like just these are admissions. Just keep that in mind. Okay, let's keep going. Whatever the cause, it is certainly the case that adult deaf mutes are sometimes hampered by the instinctive prejudices of hearing persons with whom they desire to have business or social relations. Oh my fucking god, aren't you one to talk, dipshit? Many persons have the idea that they are dangerous, morose, ill-tempered, etc. I wonder why. Then again, people do not understand the mental condition of a person who cannot speak and who thinks in gestures. He is sometimes looked upon as a sort of monstrosity, to be stared at and avoided. His gesticulations excite and surprise and even sometimes alarm in ignorant minds. In connection with this subject, I may say that as lately as 1857, a deaf mute was shot dead in Alabama by a man who was alarmed by his gestures. In fact, fallacies concerning the deaf and dumb are so common as to touch us all, and to suggest the advisability of seriously examining the fundamental ideas we hold concerning them. I have elsewhere discussed the subject of fallacies concerning the deaf and the influence of these fallacies in preventing the amelioration of their condition, and shall not therefore enlarge upon the subject here. I shall simply give a few of the conclusions at which I arrived in the paper referred to. Let's look up. Amelioration means improving. Our condition doesn't need to be proved besides getting the fuck away from you, asshole. Alright, let's talk about these fucking conclusions he arrived at. Number 1. Those whom we term deaf mutes have no other natural defect than that of deafness. They are simply persons who are deaf from childhood, and many of them are only hard of hearing. Deaf children, number 2, deaf children are dumb, not on account of lack of hearing, but of lack of instruction. No one teaches them to speak. We gotta pause here. Deaf kids have language deprivation because you're depriving them of their natural fucking language, dip fuck. Alright. Number 3, a gesture language is developed by a deaf child at home, not because it is the only form of language that is natural to one in his condition, but because his parents and friends neglect to use the English language in his presence in a clearly visible form. Pausing here. You are fucking wrong. You're dead wrong. And you know how I know? Look up how Nicaraguan sign language was created. In the 1980s, kids were banned from using sign language. Adults tried to force these kids to speak. They created their own fucking sign language. So the Nicaraguan sign language that exists today was created by fucking kids in the 80s. All right? It's innate. It is inside of us. God damn it. Anywho, fucking, you're a piece of shit. And also, the English language, did he mean spoken? Because English isn't the only language. You don't have to know English to be smart. What about other fucking spoken languages, dipshit? But we don't. But spoken language is not accessible to us. So you're fucking wrong. How the fuck are we expected to know and communicate in a language we cannot hear? You just said we cannot hear, and now you're mad at us, or you're talking down on us because we don't know what we can't hear? You listen to yourself when you talk? Are you what the fuck? And you call us dumb? Look at yourself. Look at yourself. Alright, let's keep going. We're gonna try to keep going. Number 4. Number 4A. The sign language of our institutions is an artificial and conventional language derived from pantomime. Number 4B. So far from being natural either to deaf or hearing persons, it is not understood by deaf children on their entrance to an institution, nor do hearing persons become sufficiently familiar with the language to be thoroughly qualified as teachers until after 1 or more years residence in an institution for the deaf and dumb. Let's pause here. I've already done in a different video. Studies have shown that it actually takes interpreters over 10 years after becoming an interpreter, so really more like 14 to 15 or 12 to 15 years or more to become at least 80% accurate in their interpretation of sign language. But let's keep going. 4C. The practice of the sign language hinders the acquisition of the English language. That's not true, you stupid ass bitch. The opposite is actually true, and we would just rather sign because it's accessible to us. Us preferring to sign doesn't mean it hinders us from learning English or any spoken language. It just means that spoken language isn't accessible to us. So suck my dick, alright? Okie dokie, let's keep going. 4D. It makes deaf mutes associate together in adult life and avoid a society of hearing people. Or does it make hearing people avoid us? Because hearing people can learn sign language, but we can't learn to hear, you piece of shit. 4E. It thus causes the intermarriage of deaf mutes and the propagation of their physical defect. We've already discussed, I've already told you guys like several times. Am I going to repeat it again? You yourself showed the evidence that that statement is a lie. You are contradicting yourself in your own fucking memoir, okay? Oh my god. Because you've already proven it. Oh my god. Ugh. And we're not a fucking defect. And there's nothing wrong with more deaf people existing. Fuck you. Okie dokie. Number 5. There's a sign for you, Alexander Graham Bell. Number 5. Written. You know what? Nah, this one deserves it. Before we go. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. But number 5. Written words can be associated directly with the ideas they express, without the intervention of signs. And written English can be taught to deaf children by usage so as to become their vernacular. A language can only be made vernacular by constant use as a means of communication without translation. Oh, I forgot to say that that's sentence number 6. Number 6 is a language can only be made vernacular by constant use as a means of communication without translation. Number 7. Deaf children who are familiar with the English language in either its written or spoken forms can be taught to understand the utterances of their friends by watching them munt. Number 8. The requisites to the art of speech reading are 8A. An eye trained to distinguish quickly those movements of the vocal organs that are visible independently of the meaning of what is uttered. 8B. A knowledge of homophones, am I saying that right? Homophones? Homophones? No, it doesn't sound right. Homophones? I don't know. Homophene. Nope. That is a knowledge of those words that present the same appearances to the eye. And 8C. Sufficient familiarity with the English language to enable the speech reader to judge by context which word of a homophonous group it is the word intended by the speaker. Homophonous? Nope, I don't know. Number 7. From what has been said above, it will be seen that we have in actual operation the elements necessary to compel deaf mutes to select as their partners in life persons who are familiar with the gesture language. This practically limits their selection to deaf mutes and to hearing persons related to deaf mutes. They do select such partners in marriage, and a certain proportion of their children inherit their physical defect. We are on the way, therefore, towards the formation of a deaf variety of the human race. You know what should be a drinking game? Every time he says something about the formation of a deaf variety of the human race in this fucking memoir. Alright. Time alone is necessary to accomplish the result. I thought I just read number 7. Oh, that was a sublist in that other list I was reading that I forgot about. Okay, all right. Let's orient ourselves because we are awareness of surroundings here. Let's get our awareness here. So the first list, items numbers 1 through 7, which I forgot this last number 7 was in this bigger list, is a list of from when he said if we wanted to improve the condition of the deaf, how would we start? Considering to form a race of deaf people. So he's trying to consider what makes deaf people thrive after he was saying those who believe the idea that the production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriages of the deaf with the object of applying a remedy. And then he was saying, how would we do that? And then that was it. Numbers 1 through 7 that I was just talking about, and he's talking about how in numbers 1 through 7 here, how we are separated, how we are currently separated from hearing people in our own schools. He says this is what we do. For number 2, he says this again what we do. How we promoted that we should be separated, and so there's also reunions, and so we should be socializing with each other. So they have that. There's reunions. So, And then number 3, he says what we need to do well is being able to have communication, newspapers, periodicals, and things like that. And then number 4, what he says that we need to do well is have access to sign language. Where no, that we don't need access to sign language. He thinks that we don't need sign language, but that we need to focus on spoken language is what he's saying for number 4. And but then he's also saying number 4 is weird. He actually contradicts himself in number 4 too, because he says that we think in the gesture language, and so English is a foreign tongue. So he's saying that we need to learn English so we can communicate. And that because we know sign language, we are preventing ourselves from learning English, was his argument for number 4. So, yeah, I don't know. And then in number 5, um, he was basically saying that because he doesn't know, because he was basically saying, since we're struggling to read English because we can't hear the words that they're saying, they're like, let's try teaching them a different picture language instead. But to be honest, like, that wouldn't help us, because like, how, if you can't teach us how that, you know what I mean? Like, if we can't hear you, if you're not going to sign for us, then you telling us to do something, do A won't help us if we're not, because we're not doing A. So you're like, let's do something B. We're not going to get B done if we can't do A, because you're not communicating with us if we can't hear. You know what I mean? It's about signing, not about speaking. You know what I mean? Okay, keep getting going. And then he was saying that they usually stop discussion, they try to normally stop communication between deaf and hearing people, and the exchange of information. But number 6 was basically where he was saying that misinformation should be distributed so that incorrect ideas concerning the deaf, so that people should avoid and even fear them. So he was saying, in order for deaf people to do well, he thinks hearing people should avoid and fear them. If you put that back into context. And then item number 7, he was saying, and then number 6 has 8 action items, which we'll come back to. And then item number 7 was saying that from all of this that we just discussed, we have in operation the elements necessary to then convince deaf people to only marry deaf people. You know what I'm saying? So number 7 is like his realization, like, oh, like, he's realizing that deaf people are only marrying each other because of the factors of our reality, but he's not realizing it's because we're treated like shit by him. And so we lean on each other for support, you know? Okay, and then back to number 6 real quick. There's 8 sub items in number 6. And again, we're not going to go back over all those sub items, but number 6 was again about spreading misinformation in order to isolate deaf from hearing people, so that hearing people would avoid and fear us. And this is the root of hearing people representing deafness in all academic and medical forms. And this is the underlying roots of hearing people controlling all of the information on deaf people, from online to beyond. Okay. Now we're going to keep going with this chapter. If we desired such a result, would what, okay, so, I cannot speak. We're going to go again. If we desired such a result, what more could we do to hasten the end in view? We might attempt to formulate some plan which should lead the deaf children of deaf mutes to marry one another. instead of marrying deaf mutes who had not inherited their deafness, or to marry hearing persons belonging to families in which deafness is hereditary. If, for instance, a number of the large deaf-mute families of the United States, families in which we know deafness to be hereditary, were to settle in a common place so as to form a community largely composed of deaf-mutes, then the deaf children born in the colony would be thrown into association with one another and would probably intermarry in adult life, or marry hearing persons belonging to the deaf-mute families. Though fewer in number than the original deaf settlers, they would probably be more prolific of deaf offspring, and each succeeding generation of deaf-mutes would increase the probability of the deaf-mute element being rendered permanent by heredity. Such a result would certainly ensure such a result would certainly ensue if the numbers of the deaf and dumb in the colony were constantly kept up by the immigration of congenital deaf mutes from the outside, and if a large proportion of the hearing children born in the colony were to leave and mingle with the outside world. Under such circumstances, we might anticipate that a very few generations would suffice for the establishment of a permanent race of deaf mutes with a language and literature of its own. Plans for the formation of a deaf-mute community have a number of times been discussed by the deaf-mutes themselves. The idea originated in the action of Congress in endowing the American Asylum for the Deaf Mutes at Hartford with a tract of land. This says Mon Laurent Clerk, in conversation with some of the earlier pupils of the American Asylum, remarked that it would be a good plan to sell a proportion of the land for the benefit of the institution and retain the remainder as headquarters for the deaf and dumb, to which they would emigrate after being educated. This idea took root in the minds of the pupils of the American Asylum, and afterwards developed into a number of independent and eccentric schemes for the formation of a deaf-mute community. Some of the pupils before their graduation formed an agreement to emigrate the West and settle in a common place. Then, a number of years afterwards, a deaf-mute publicly urged the formation of a deaf-mute commonwealth. Congress was to be petitioned to form a deaf-mute state or territory, etc. The details, though quite impractical, brought forward the fact that a number of schemes of somewhat similar character were in the minds of deaf-mutes in different parts of the country. One deaf-mute publicly offered to contribute $5,000 towards such a scheme if others could be found to join him. Let's Google. How much was $5,000 worth in 1880? $5,000 in 1880 was about 150 grand today. Oh, damn. It was urged that the natural affection of the parents would lead to the distribution of the land among the children, and that as the majority of their children could hear and speak, the land would soon pass out of the control of the deaf-mutes themselves. This was to be remedied in various ways, as, for instance, by legislation, so as to secure descent in the deaf-mute line alone. The American that looks like annuals. Is that annuals? The American annuals of the deaf and dumb became the channel of communication between the various thinkers. The scheme that received most approbation was the purchase of a tract of land by a few of the wealthy deaf mutes, who were to agree to sell out the land in small blocks to other deaf mutes. The whole scheme was afterwards discussed at a convention of the deaf mutes of New England, and was overthrown by the influence of the Reverend W. W. Turner, Mr. Laurent Clerk, and other teachers, in conjunction with the most intelligent of the deaf mutes themselves. Since then, oh my fucking god, he was like, the deaf people that didn't want to live on their own were the smart ones. That is so, you're not like other girls. Okay. Since then, the subject has not been publicly discussed to my knowledge, but such a scheme is still favored by individual deaf mutes, and may therefore be revived in organized shape at any time. The horrors. Here we have conclusion. Let me just make sure it's not the conclusion of the whole document, or if it's the conclusion of the chapter. Okay, that's the conclusion of the whole document. Alright. We have finished chapter 6. Yay! Okie dokie. Let me double check where I am in my journey here. A 2-hour live stream. Okay, I'm killing it over here. Okay. Yeah. On track here. So, let's summarize chapter 6. This one is a rough one, because he put so much fucked up shit in here that it's really hard to process all of this that is happening. It's just like, wait, what the fuck just happened? Like, holy fuck. Hold on. Wait a minute. Wait. Hold on. Like, so, chapter 6 was called Upon the Causes That Determine the Selection of the Deaf by the Deaf in Marriage. So in the chapter where he's like, why do deaf want to marry each other? He says, those who believe as I do that the production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriage of the deaf with the object of applying a remedy. Yes, I am reading that yet again because I really need y'all to get that through your head. So this is the context for chapter 6, where he's saying upon the causes that determine the selection of the deaf by the deaf in marriage. And then he's going through and he's like, okay, well, what makes deaf people successful? He is kind of right about some shit. He's very wrong about some shit. And things he's right about, he is actually wrong. Or if he's right, he is not right for the reason he thinks he's right. A lot of things he's wrong about, he just, I don't even know why the fuck he thinks he's right. I don't even know. Most of it's just really wrong. Anywho, I don't even know if I said if I'm making sense right now. Okay, but he's basically saying his theories as to what provides a suitable life for deaf people, you know? Oh yeah, so for reasons he doesn't want deaf people to succeed are actually what makes us succeed. So for reasons he thinks that we don't succeed are actually why we do succeed. And reasons that he thinks we succeed are actually why we don't succeed, is what I was trying to say. Okay, and so that's what this chapter basically shows and summarizes and discusses. And yeah. And so then let's summarize, let's compare this. So chapter 4, is families of deaf mutes. Chapter 4, families of deaf mutes. We're talking about, he's saying all this shit, like trashing who's getting married and trying to basically just kind of be like, oh God, can you believe these people exist and they're going to keep having kids and shit? What will we do if we don't stop them? And in chapter 5, he's saying upon the growth of the deaf mute population, he's showing the graphs of us, and he is basically saying, look, these bitches, they've been growing, there's more of them, they're going to keep growing, and we need to make sure they're not going to outnumber us. What will we do if more deaf people just keep living, is kind of the idea of that. And then chapter 6, which we just ended up finishing here, is called Upon the Causes That Determine the Selection of the Deaf by the Deaf in Marriage. And in this chapter, he's over here just like, holy shit, well, how can we stop deaf people from existing? Because we need to fix the fact that they exist. So let's look at what I think makes them successful. And so that's what happened with that. So it's kind of interesting because there's a big difference between reality and his mindset. So, when we talk about what makes deaf people successful in here, we're talking about Alexander Graham Bell's mindset about us, not the reality of us. Where's my conclusion at? Here you go. Okie dokie. And so now we're going to read the conclusion. We made it. We finished all of the chapters of this stupid ass fucking book. Horrible fucking book. All right. I am so proud of you if you've been making it this far. So, conclusion. He says, I think all will agree that the evidence shows a tendency. Oh, am I not showing? There we go. My apologies. Okay. Conclusion. I think all will agree that the evidence shows a tendency to the formation of a deaf variety of the human race in America. While remedial measures can be taken to lessen or check this tendency, we shall consider the subject under two heads: repressive, preventative measures. Let's play back this one. What remedial measures can be taken to lessen or check this tendency, which this tendency is referring to the formation of a deaf variety of the human race in America. He says we shall consider the subject under two heads. 1, repressive. 2, preventive measures. So this statement is him saying he wants to repress and prevent deaf people in America. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. Yep. Let that marinate. Number 1, repressive measures. The first thought that occurs in this connection is that the intermarriage of deaf mutes might be forbidden by legislative enactment. So long, however, as deaf mutes of both sexes continue to associate together in adult life, legislative interference with marriage might only promote immortality, but without entirely prohibiting intermarriage might. Oh my God, okay, that makes more sense. I was just thinking, I apologize. I was just thinking immortality does not make sense. We're not fucking vampires. What? I read that wrong. It's immorality. We're gonna wind this back. We're gonna take this from the top. My mind needs to process this information. So let's go again. Number 1, repressive measures. The first thought that occurs in this connection is that the intermarriage of deaf mutes might be forbidden by legislative enactment. So long, however, as deaf mutes of both sexes continue to associate together in adult life. Legislative interference with marriage might only promote immorality. That makes more sense. But without entirely prohibiting intermarriage, might not the marriages of the deaf be so regulated as to reduce the probabilities of the production of deaf offspring to a minimum? What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. He's saying, he basically just said it would be immoral to ban marriage entirely, but let's just regulate it. So that way less deaf people might exist. What? Bruh. Just say you just want to control deaf people because you hate us for some fucking reason. Like, cause all of this, because, like, no, but for real, this is all only about controlling deaf people and hating deaf people, because he's already admitted, that there are more hearing people, than deaf people giving birth to deaf people. So, therefore, this is only about controlling deaf people. Like, you can't tell me different. For instance, a law forbidding congenitally deaf persons from intermarrying would go a long way towards checking the evil. What? What evil? Oh my God. For a law forbidding congenitally deaf persons from intermarrying would go a long way towards checking the evil? He's calling me evil? He's calling us congenitally deaf people evil? He's calling people born deaf evil? Or us having kids evil? You're the fucking evil one, you dipshit. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. Such a law might, however, become inoperative on account of the impossibility of proving that a person had been born deaf. Fuck you. Legislation forbidding the intermarriage of persons belonging to families containing more than one deaf mute would be more practicable. This would cover the intermarriage of hearing persons belonging to such families, and also the case of this is that word I don't know again, consanguineous. I don't know this. Let's Google this. What the fuck is that word? Consanguineous marriage. Oh shit, that's incest. Okay. Well, I can't pronounce this word, so I'm just gonna say incest. Uh, I'm just in a deaf family. That's sad. Um, you know what? Consanguineous of some type of marriage in a deaf family, and I kind of wish I didn't look that up. Um, kind of wish I did not look that up. Okay. Keep going. In order to justify the passage of such an act, however, the results of intermarriages of this kind should be more fully investigated than is possible at the present time on account of limited data. No one will give you any fucking data. Steps should be taken towards the collection of special statistics, and the institutions should be urged to publish the materials in their possession. I wrote to the principals of all institutions in the country, requesting them to forward to me such of their published reports as contained any of the required statistics. Although my request was honored by a response from a large number of institutions, the information contained in their reports and reference to the subject of inquiry was generally of the most meager description. Among repressive measures should perhaps be included the influence of friends to prevent undesirable intermarriages. While such action might affect individual cases, it could not greatly influence the general result. For there is no subject on which a man will so little brook interference as one of this kind where his affections are involved. For there is no subject on which a man will so little brook interference as one of this kind where his affections are involved. I've never seen brook used in this way before, so that is just a confusing line for me to read. I apologize, I got hung up on it. But yes, and then another thought I just had is I might do a live on or a recap on, but you know what? Let me just guide you right now. I did do a video where I think it's called something along the lines of Did Deaf People Misunderstand Alexander Graham Bell? I think it's called that or something like that. I'll try to remember to link that one. But that one basically shows you where Alexander Graham Bell gaslights us. So in a speech at Gallaudet University about 10 years after this, he basically says deaf people have it in their heads that I tried to pass laws to prevent them from marrying, but that's not true. I never did any of that. So we just read what the fuck he just said about all of that, right? So you know how fucking gaslighting that is? And that's how it feels most of the time when hearing people are talking to me about deafness. That's how it feels most of the time. Or when they're trying to claim they're not discriminating, that's how it is most of the time. um, alright. Let's keep going. A due consideration of all the objections renders it doubtful whether legislative interference with the marriage of the deaf should be advisable. Number 2, preventative measures. The most promising method of lessening the evil appears to lie in the adoption of preventative measures. In our search for such measures, we should be guided by the following principle. Number 1, determine the causes that promote intermarriage among the deaf and dumb. And number 2, remove them. Let's just review the repressive and preventative measures real quick, put this into context. So, in his conclusion, Alexander Graham Bell says there's a tendency for deaf people, for the formation of deaf people to exist in America. And then he says what remedial measures can be taken to lessen or check this tendency shall be considered regarding repressive and preventative measures. Then in repressive measures, he's talking about passing a law to prevent us from marrying if he could. And then he is saying that there should be one to stop congenitally deaf from marrying congenitally deaf. And then he says that the most promising method of lessening the evil appears to lie in the adoption of preventative measures, and that he must determine the causes that promote deaf people from getting married and remove them. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. Yep. So, can't tell me nothing. Fucking eugenicist piece of shit. Alright, let's keep going. The immediate cause is undoubtedly the preference that adult deaf mutes exhibit for the companionship of deaf mutes rather than that of hearing persons. I wonder why. Among the causes that contribute to bring about this preference, we may note 1. Segregation for the purposes of education, and 2. The use as a means of communication of a language which is different from that of the people. So basically he's blaming deaf people for knowing a different language. Oh my god. Then These then are two of the points that should be avoided in the adoption of preventative measures. Nearly all the other causes I have investigated are ultimately referable to these. Segregation really lies at the root of the whole matter. For from this, the other causes have themselves been evolved by the operation of the natural law of adaptation to the environment. We commence our efforts on behalf of the deaf mute by changing his social environment. You're not doing anything on behalf of us, asshole. The tendency is then towards accommodation to the new conditions. In process of time, the adaptation becomes complete, and when at last we restore him to the world as an adult, he finds that the social conditions to which he has become accustomed do not exist outside of his school life. His efforts are then directed to the restoration of these conditions, with the result of intermarriage and a tendency to the formation of a deaf-mute community. There's just so much wrong here. The grand central principle that should guide us then in our search for preventative measures should be the retention of the normal environment during the period of education. The natural tendency towards adaptation, the natural tendency towards adaptation would then cooperate with instruction to produce accommodation to the permanent conditions of life. The direction of change should therefore be towards the establishment of small schools and the extension of the day school plan. The practicability of any great development of day schools will depend upon the possibility of conducting very small schools of this kind economically to the state, for the scattered condition of the deaf and dumb in the community precludes the idea of large day schools excepting in the great centers of population. The principle referred to above indicates that such schools should be of the minimum size possible, for the school that would most perfectly fulfill the condition required would contain only one deaf child. It also points to the advisability of coeducation with hearing children, but this is not practicable to any great extent. No instruction can be given through the ear, and complete coeducation would only therefore be possible by a change in the methods of teaching hearing children. It is useless to expect that such possible I was reading the beginning of the sentence that I just read. It is useless to expect that such a change would be made for the benefit of the deaf and dumb on account of their limited number. Excuse me here while I process deaf people getting assimilated into public and mainstream schools with this context. So before deaf people were assimilated into mainstream schools, we were forced to go to our own schools. And then, after Alexander Graham Bell publishes his memoir upon the formation of a deaf variety of the human race, where he is claiming it would be a horrendous calamity to the world if more deaf people existed because we are a defect, that deaf people aren't learning spoken language because we learn sign language, and that sign language is what prevents us from learning spoken language, which is not true. So with that context of that being taught, he then says, in order to fix this, one of the things that we need to do is change his social environment and try, and he's basically, to summarize him, he's basically saying, and to paraphrase him, that he needs to assimilate deaf people into their hearing world so we are less likely to have deaf community. Keep that in mind for the historical, political, and social background and ideologies that went into the deaf assimilation into mainstream society and education. and how that harmed all of us and continues to harm us today. And think about how that, when I think about how all this fucked my childhood up, it's just like, wow. And when you then have, most deaf people who are then mainstreamed, we often have the hearing people, trying to tell us we're not deaf, etc. A lot of us do things like that. You keep all of this into context, into the Alexander Graham Bell history of it. It's just like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Okay. Let's keep going. Partial coeducation is, however, possible, for some studies are pursued in the common schools in which information is gained through the eye. For instance, deaf mutes could profitably, does that say profitably? For instance, deaf mutes could profitably, it does, could profitably enter the same classes with hearing children for practice in writing, drawing, map drawing, arithmetic on the blackboard, sewing, etc. I never caught this before. Holy shit. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. So, I did a whole nother thing where I did like a marketing theory about Alexander Graham Bell. It's a conspiracy theory that Alexander Graham Bell treated deaf people like shit in order to increase his sales. And this line proves that to me. This line proves that to me. And you really can't tell me different. He said deaf mutes could profitably enter the same classes with hearing children for practice in writing, drawing, map drawing, arithmetic, on the blackboard, sewing, etc. So he's over here like, not only not only can I fuck deaf people's life up, I can make some money too. This is bruh, dude. What the fuck does profits have to do with this? Is this a business report? I thought this was a study on deafness, and you are talking about profits. What? Okay. I wish, I had that like Emily D. Baker or like Runkle the Bailey style type fan base, because I just really feel like I need people in this moment with me. You know what I mean? But I'm gonna get there one day. That's totally fine. All right. I'm gonna keep going. And you know what? Whenever I do get there one day, if you're watching now, you're gonna be like, I remember when I watched that bitch before she had any fucking followers. So, thanks. You're one of the real ones. Alright, keeping going. Then he says, for other subjects, special methods of instruction would be necessary, and these demand the employment of special teachers. They do not, however, necessitate special schools or buildings, and a small room in a public school building would accommodate as many deaf children as one teacher could successfully instruct. Considerations of economy render advisable the appropriation of a room of this kind, as the appliances of a large school might thus be obtained without special outlay. I'm sorry, but unless it is from a deaf person, or unless it is about income disparity, if you are talking about profits and you are talking about the economy in regards to a memoir on deaf people, that's fucking creepy. This is capitalism at its finest. I hate capitalism. What the hell, man? Wow. And it's like some of these, I've been saying this type of shit about AGB, like from the energy I get from what I knew about him, but then reading it in his own words is like, oh, I was right from my energy. It's like when you know, you know, you know? Um, So yeah, we're gonna keep going. Oh fuck, it gets worse. Okay, here we go. The average per capita cost of the education of a deaf child in an American institution is $223.28 per, is that annum? Per annum. How much? I just Googled how much was $234 in 1880. And this says it was worth about 3,042. Okay. Very small day schools could be maintained at no greater cost. The cost at an institution, however, includes board and industrial training. I don't know why you're breaking down the cost for this. Is this a business proposal? Is this a business proposal? Is this a memoir? Is this a deaf study? What the fuck is this? I thought like a memoir was supposed to be like a reflection of your life's work or something. What the fuck is this? Holy fuck. You sound like you are a shitty salesman with a fucking scam, but you're just, um, exploiting deaf people to get money from hearing people. This is what the fuck you sound like. Like, what the fuck is this? Alright, let's keep going. On the day school plan, the parents would generally assume the expense of maintenance, and some special provision would have to be made for industrial training. This need give no concern, for so many deaf mutes are earning their livelihood by trades, which they were not taught in the institutions, as to demonstrate the practicability of apprenticing deaf mutes in ordinary shops. The indications are that in all places where 3 or 4 deaf children could be brought together near their homes, the cost would be no more to form them into a class in the nearest public school building under a special teacher than to send them to an institution. Wow, because this is the shit that really did happen. Holy fuck. So I'm sorry, y'all can't tell me AGB didn't influence all this shit when he's writing about the shit that happened before it happened. And it's like, looks like it's his fucking idea. Look at this shit. But he could have been stolen all of this shit from other people too, like he did the telephone. But he still obviously believed and supported it. I was just giving the captioner a chance to catch up here, and we're going to keep going now. And that was shrinking a little bit. Okay. The indications are that in all places where 3 or 4 deaf children could be brought together near their homes, the cost would be no more to form them. Oh, wait, I just said this. On the basis of the average per capita cost at an institution, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little confused of where I'm at. All right, let's go. On the basis of the average per capita cost at an institution, the sum of $669.84 would be received for 3 and 800 and I think that's $93.12 for 4 pupils. And such sums would probably be sufficient to pay the salary of a special teacher as well as to cover incidental expenses. If this is so, the day school system could be made to penetrate into the smaller centers of population as well into the large cities, in which case it would exert a considerable influence as a remedial agent. The plan of forming small classes of deaf children in public school buildings recommends itself as affording the closest recommends itself as affording the closest approximation possible on the large scale to the normal conditions of life. Segregation during education has not only favored the tendency towards the formation of a race of deaf mutes, but has led to the evolution of a special language adapted for the use of such a race, the sign language of the deaf and dumb. This is especially true in America, where the sign language is employed by a large majority of the teachers in instructing their pupils. In foreign countries, the vast majority employ, for this purpose, the ordinary language of the people. This will fully appear by reference to the Table 5 in the Appendix. That is because he got sign language banned at the Milan Conference of 1880 worldwide. Are you kidding me? Oh, I just realized. I don't know why the sign language, there it moves. Okay. I don't know why, but the sign language captioner wasn't showing everything. This should be considerable influence. Okay. I am hoping that everything is accessible. I got a little distracted there. My apologies. Playing with the web captioner here. We're going to keep going. If this is so, the day school system could be made to penetrate into the smaller centers of population as well as into the large cities, in which case it would exert a considerable influence as a remedial agent. The plan of forming small classes of deaf children in public school buildings recommends itself as affording the closest approximation possible, on the large scale, to the normal conditions of life. Segregation during education. I don't know why that's not working all of a sudden, but it was before. I'm going to just try and leave it alone and hopefully it works, and we'll troubleshoot for next time. Hopefully the auto captioner from YouTube is working as well. Alright, let's keep going. Let's try. Oh, you know what? And I was rereading what I had just said again anyway. I apologize because we had already just talked about the sign language. Okay, and alright. Okay, I found where I am. We're right here. Here we go. Okay, let's go. The lack of articulate speech should also be noted as an indirect cause of segregation in adult life, operating to separate deaf mutes from hearing persons. Hence, instruction in articulation and speech reading should be given to every pupil. This is done in Germany. Indeed, in 1882, more than 65% of all the deaf and dumb in foreign schools were being taught to speak and understand the speech of others, whereas in America, less than 9% are to be found in oral schools. According to more recent statistics compiled by the Clark Institution, we find that in May 1883, about 14% of the deaf and dumb in American institutions were using speech in the schoolroom as the language of communication with their teachers. 18% were taught to speak as an accomplishment, and 68% received no instruction whatever in articulation. Nearly one-third of the teachers of the deaf and dumb in America are themselves deaf, and this must be considered as another element favorable to the formation of a deaf race to be therefore avoided. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. So this is another reason why deaf people should be the ones to represent and to teach not only deaf awareness but also sign language. It's because of this history that has come into place. So from this, after all of this, a bunch of deaf teachers were removed from schools in America. So yeah. And that's why we say, like, only, well, that's part of why. There's a lot of reasons why. But part of why we say only learn, sign language and deaf issues from deaf people. It's because of this and because of all of this history. And because there's so much history and nuance to know that hearing people, they don't have the lived experience to accurately share or represent these issues. Okay, dokie. So I can see that my thing cut off again. I'm gonna see what happens when I don't tap that down arrow for a second, if it will just automatically go or if I need to hit that blue button for it to. But my auto captioner stopped working again, which distracts me. So I gotta figure that out for future lives. Okay, that did not go. I did sign what I was saying for that time. So I'm hoping between, that and the YouTube auto captioners also that there will be there will be captions and everything. Okay, let's finish this conclusion. He says after he says nearly 1/3 of the teachers of the deaf and dumb in America are themselves deaf, and this must be considered as another element favorable to the formation of a deaf race to be therefore avoided. What the fuck? Did I do my what the hell Alexander Graham Bell buffer? I forgot if I did that or not, so I'm not going to do it again in case I did it. I don't want to do it twice, but yeah, that deserves that. Okay, keep going. The segregation of deaf mutes, the use of the sign language, and the employment of deaf teachers produce an environment that is unfavorable to the cultivation of articulation and speech reading, and that sometimes causes the disuse of speech by speaking pupils who are only deaf. What the fuck? Having shown the tendency to the formation of a deaf variety of the human race in America and some of the means that should be taken to counteract it, I commend the whole subject to the attention of scientific men. Alexander Graham Bell, that's how Alexander Graham Bell ended his conclusion. He really, really thought that was a mic drop. He really thought that was a mic drop. Fuck that dude, man. Yeah, so he said, having shown the tendency for deaf people to just fucking live here, let's counteract it. And we need the whole scientific men's attention. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. So, ain't that some shit? Fucking after all of that, so let's go over this conclusion. In the conclusion, he's basically saying We need to lessen or check the existence of deaf people. We need to repress them. We need to prevent them. We need to repress their ability to get married in the law. And we need to prevent the causes that promote intermarriage and remove them. That was the whole point of his conclusion. He's like, in conclusion, we need to try and we need there to be less deaf people. How is that your conclusion? Like, holy shit. All right. I fucking can't believe all this shit. So let's compare these real quick. So, in chapter 4, what was chapter 4 called? So I think chapter 4 was called Marriages to the Deaf. That was right. Chapter 4 is Marriages to the Deaf, and where he's talking all about deaf, how he has tracked the families of deaf people. Chapter 5 is called Population Growth of Deaf, or Upon the Growth of the Deaf Mute Population is chapter 5. And he's concerned about the fact that, more of us are existing. And then in chapter 6, he calls that upon the causes that determine the selection of the deaf by the deaf in marriage. And his whole point here is we should figure out why deaf people want to marry each other and stop them from doing that. And then he concludes with his entire conclusion is, okay, so you can see, we're scared of deaf people. We should be spreading misinformation about them. After in chapter 6, he's saying let's spread misinformation. So in the conclusion, he's like, and in conclusion, we need to make sure we are repressing them and that we are preventing them from getting married and forming communities and from continuing to exist. That is his conclusion. Let that all marinate. We made it. We did it. We're only 3 hours in. Can you believe it? Congratulations if he made it this far. Okay, let's go over the appendix. Like, while I'm still steaming, full steam ahead, let's do this bitch. So now we're going to go over the appendix. Number 1. Tables A to M give an analysis of 3,726 cases of deaf mutes from the American Asylum and Illinois Institution. For this analysis, I am indebted to Mr. Frank Z. McGuire of Washington, D.C., and I have personally verified his results. The relation of the tables to one another will be understood from the following classification. Classification of tables A to K. Table A gives the summation of tables B, C, and D. Table B gives the summation of tables E and F. Table C gives the summation of tables G and H. Table D gives the summation of tables I and J. In Table K, the non-congenitally deaf pupils are classified according to period of birth and according to period when deafness occurred. In Table L, the non-congenitally deaf pupils of the American Asylum are classified according to the period when hearing was lost and according to the diseases that caused deafness. In Table M, the non-congenitally deaf pupils of the Illinois Institution are classified according to the period when hearing was lost and according to the diseases that caused deafness. And then in It shows like a little diagram thing, and it says classification of tables A to K. Total numbers of pupils of the American Asylum and Illinois Institution. Then it goes, whose deafness was to be congenital, recorded to have deaf relatives, and recorded as sporadic cases. Okay, so from the American Asylum and Illinois Institution, they recorded who had deaf mute relatives and whose sporadic cases from congenital deaf, non-congenital, and whose deafness was not stated. Item number 2. Tables N, O, P, Q relate to the 10th Census of the United States, 1880. And give the results of an analysis of 22,472 cases of deaf mutes from the census returns. See communication by the Reverend Fred D. Wines upon the 1880 census of the deaf and dumb. Proceedings of the 10th Convention of American Instructors of the Deaf and Dumb, Jacksonville, Illinois, August 1882. Published with the 21st biennial report by, is that biennial? That looks like biennial. Published with the 21st biennial report of the Illinois Institution for the Deaf and Dumb. Table N gives an analysis of 22,472 cases of deaf mutes living June 1st, 1880, showing the number who became deaf each year since the year 1770. Table O shows the number of these deaf mutes who became deaf each year since 1873, separating the congenital from the non-congenital cases. Table P classifies the 22,472 cases by periods of 5 years and reduces the number who became deaf in each I cannot say this word, quinquennial period to a percentage of the whole on a basis of 10,000 cases in all. Table Q classifies the 22,472 cases by periods of 5 years and separates the congenital from the non-congenital cases. Table number 3. Table R shows the number of deaf mutes in the United States living June 1st, 1880, arranged according to race and sex according to cause of deafness. The materials for this table have been furnished in advance of the publication of the census returns by the courtesy of General Scatton, General Superintendent of the Census. Number 4. Table S shows A, the number of schools and institutions for the education of the deaf and dumb in the United States in 1883. B, the date of opening of each institution. C, the number of deaf children under instruction, 1883. And D, the total number of pupils that have been received into the institutions. These particulars have been obtained from the American Annuals of the Deaf and Dumb. The table also shows the number of deaf children whose parents were deaf mutes who have been received into the institutions. These particulars have been received directly from the principals or superintendents of the institutions and schools in answer to a circular letter of inquiry. The total number of such pupils cannot be ascertained from the table, as some of the institutions have not yet made returns. Number 5. Table T gives an analysis of 215 cases of deaf mutes whose parents were deaf. Number 6. In Table U, the total population of the country, the congenitally deaf population, and the deaf mutes who have both parents deaf are classified according to their period of birth, and the number of persons born in each period has been reduced to a percentage of the whole. Number 7. Table 5 contains a tabular statement of the institutions of the world in 1882, showing the methods of instruction employed. This table is taken from the American Annuals of the Deaf and Dumb for January 1883. Number 8. Table W gives a list of those pupils of our institutions for the deaf and dumb who are stated to have deaf parents. The information has been obtained directly from the principals and superintendents of the institutions in answer to a letter of inquiry. Number 9. Table X shows the per capita cost of the education of a deaf child in an American institution. This table was prepared by the principal of the Illinois institution from materials published in the American Annals. I don't like that they say that word. And from the American Annals, I don't like that they say that word. Annals is what they say. From the American Annals. Okay. Number 9. Table X shows. Oh, did I just read? No, I didn't. Number 9. Table X shows per capita cost of the education of a deaf child in an American institution. This table was prepared by the principal of the Illinois institution from materials published in the American Annals of the Deaf and Dumb and from other materials privately collected and published in the 21st Biennial Report of the Illinois institution. Oh, I did just read that. My bad. Okay. I got hung up on the word annals. Number 10. Table Y contains a tabular statement concerning the teaching of articulation in the institutions of the United States in May 1883. The information was obtained by the principal of the Clark Institution, Northampton, Massachusetts, directly from the principals of the other institutions in reply to a I can't read that word, to something of inquiry. See Appendix B, 16th Annual Report of the Clark Institution for Deaf Mutes, September 1, 1883. And I'm going over this because I feel like it puts the rest of everything of the research that we've all been discussing and reading into context. So I do think the appendix is important too because it's more context for what he understood. Okay. Number 10, table, just read that. Number 11. Appendix Z contains an examination of the marriages of the pupils of the American Asylum and Illinois Institution by light of theory of probabilities, with the object of determining approximately the proportion of the congenitally deaf who marry congenital deaf mutes. This investigation has been kindly undertaken by Professor Simon Newcomb, to whom I am indebted for the results obtained. And then it shows Table A, which we described earlier. And it's the total number of people in the American Asylum and Illinois institution, and it's broken down by decades and by the types of deafness and all of that. And so, yeah, they got a lot of tables in here. The appendix is just him providing the evidence for what we've been discussing in chapters 1 through 6 from the research he said he got from other people. And then in table K, he shows non-congenital pupils. Oh, I apologize. We just went through how many tables was this? By institution here. Yeah. So tables A through like what is that? K? Oh yeah, basically tables A through J, they're all pretty similar. They're all broken down by school, by decade, by congenital deafness, by relationships, and all of that stuff that we've been discussing, the marriages and everything. And then table K is a different type of table. It's broken down, it's just between the American Asylum and the Illinois institution. It's non-congenital deafness broken down by period. Table L is also non-congenital deafness broken down by time period, just the American Asylum this time, and it's broken down by the cause of deafness. And then table M, it shows non-congenital types of deafness for the Illinois institution by the decade and by the cause. Table N shows an analysis of 22,472 cases of the deaf from the census by the year. And table O is a different table of the same census analysis, but it's the former broke down the population by year, and this one breaks down the population by whether they are congenitally or non-congenitally deaf. Then in table P, they break it down by time period and then by the number and percentage of people. Then table Q, they do the same thing, but they're without the percentage. It's by period, by congenital versus non-congenital in comparison to the population size by time period. Um, Table R is the total number of deaf people in the United States from cause of deafness based, and it I feel like this is very racist, but it says colored, foreign white, native white, or total. So, and what the fuck do they mean by foreign white or native white? By native white, do they mean native people who they forced to get with them and then had kids, descendants of them? Or do they mean, or are they calling themselves natives here? But by foreign white, are they admitting that they're foreigners? So are we admitting that we are illegal immigrants finally? I don't get this one. Okay, so table S, and this one just shows the institution for the deaf and dumb in the United States in 1883 So okay, all of it shows the population of the deaf by every single institution. It's crazy. From a specific date. Oh, and it shows their date of opening and all of that. Okay. And then table T shows deaf mute offspring of deaf mute parents, and that's broken down by periods of birth. Table U is the deaf mute population compared with the population at large. Scary. Um, Table B is the tabular statement of institutions of the world for the education of the deaf and dumb. So this is, all around the world. And then table W is a partial list of deaf children of deaf parents. Creepy. I forgot to keep all of this in focus on my screen here, so that's my bad. Oh, that's more of table W. Okay, table W is kind of long. Some of these tables taking up multiple pages. Multiple pages. Okay. So, table X is he's showing the cost per capita for the education of a deaf child in an American institution. Then table Y is a tabular statement concerning the teaching of kids in the US, so they break it down. Oh, did they break it down by the deaf institution, by the location, who's in charge, and the population, and all of that. Table Y is another tabular statement. It's about articulation. It's just okay, this is the same one. It's continued. And then Appendix Z. How many appendices do you have? You know what? I think we're nearing the end here. The following table combining all of the cases of marriage recorded in tables A to J was submitted to Professor Simon Newcomb for his opinion regarding the number of congenital deaf mutes who had married congenital deaf mutes. The reports of the American Asylum and Illinois Institution give no information bearing on this point, but it seemed possible to determine the probabilities from the data given in the table, especially as the intermarriages, in a large proportion of cases, undoubtedly occurred between deaf mutes who had been educated in the same institution and who were therefore both included in the table. And then it's the table. It shows the cause of deafness: congenital, non-congenital, or not stated. Whether or not the deaf person was recorded to marry a deaf person, or whether or not the deaf person was married but not recorded to marry a deaf person. The main question proposed was this: of the congenital deaf mutes who are recorded to have married deaf mutes, what proportion have married congenital deaf mutes? Professor Newcomb has been kind enough to send the following letters in reply to the query. Dear Mr. Bell, although the question you ask, oh, you know what? I forgot to say, this says Nautical Almanac Office, Navy Department, Washington, D.C., May 20th, 1884. Dear Mr. Bell, although the question you ask seems to admit of a satisfactory answer, I notice a singular defect in the statistical table. It contains not a single case of a deaf mute being reported as having married a hearing person. If this is an accident, if this is an accidental, is that accidental omission? I think it says that. I think it says if this is an accidental omission in making the copy for you, it ought to be corrected. If there is really no such record, the case is very singular. It would look as if the parties were ashamed to state that they had married hearing persons, or their recorders had rejected all such cases. The main question you ask can, I think, be answered by the theory of probabilities. Your table, if I understand it correctly, shows that out of 629 persons in the institution, of whom 329 were males and 300 females, a little less than one half, 298, were congenital deaf mutes. Now I see no reason for supposing that the persons whom they married would be divided in any essentially different proportion between the two classes. It is true that could we learn from the census tables how the entire deaf of the country of marriageable ages, say between the ages of 20 and 30, are divided between the two classes, our conclusions might be modified. If, for example, it should be found that of the total number of deaf alluded to, only 1/3 were congenital cases, we might be allowed to suppose that the marriages reported were divided according to this ratio, rather than according to the approximate ratio of equality found in the asylum. But we should consider that this surplus of non-congenital deaf would indicate a class who associate principally with hearing persons, and who would therefore be less likely to marry deaf mutes than others would. I think, therefore, that under the circumstances, we should regard the ratio given by statistics of the institutions as the most probable one. Of course, the reason for this is strengthened if, as you intimate, a large proportion of the statistics may be mutual, allowing for a probable slight tendency of the two classes, congenital and non-congenital, to choose each other. I think the most probable conclusion would be this. Of the congenital deaf, one half married congenital and one half non-congenital deaf. That makes no sense. Of the non-congenital, 3/7 married congenital deaf and 4/7 non-congenital deaf. What? And I consider these results sufficiently probable to form the basis of conclusions in cases where slight changes in the numbers would not change the general results. If you wish your table returned, please inform me. Yours very truly, S. Newcomb. Washington, D.C., May 26, 1884. Dear Mr. Bell, the remarkable agreement between the ratio of congenital and non-congenital cases in the census reports and in the numbers married affords a strong confirmation of the probable soundness of the conclusion I indicated to you. The small discrepancy to which you allude probably arose from the 25 not stated cases. I return you the tables. Yours very truly, S. Newcomb. Oh, it looks like that is the end. We did it. Finished. We did the whole damn thing. We did this whole damn thing. Okay, I can't fucking believe we did this whole damn thing. Fucking Yeah, this appendix was a lot. What there really is to summarize here, all there really is to summarize is this is the data. This is all the data in a visual form, and the sources cited that Alexander Graham Bell says he got his information from for everything else. So I'm going to just sit here for 1 second. Let's all process what the fuck we just read or heard, or maybe both, if you're following along here. Um, so yeah, because this is a lot. It's a lot to take in. So in the appendix here, we have our sources. We've got these letters from that dip book. And and Alexander Graham Bell really thinks he did something cool with this shit here. So in moving on to recap here. So let's take it from the top. Let's just recap the whole thing now. So, chapter 4 is called Marriages of, you know what? We really just recapped. Do I really need a recap? I summarized the whole thing when I did the book, and then I went over the appendix. I honestly don't feel like I need to recap chapters 4 through 6 again and the conclusion, because we did do that recap and then I moved on to the appendix. So boom, we have an appendix. So let's recap the whole fucking book instead. Did they tell you? Alright. That's interesting that it's only showing up 3 times here. Oh, that didn't do well. So, chapter 1 is called Upon the Materials for the Formation of a Deaf Variety of the Human Race at Present Existing in America. But you know what, let's look at this introduction. So, in the introduction, he's talking about how we can modify human beings. Oh, hey, Bohidi, how you doing? It's good to see you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. This whole thing has been a shitstorm. And so I can't believe it, but we really finished and got through 97 pages. So, yep. And now I'm just going to summarize the entire fucking thing real quick. And then we're going to end this bitch. But fucking, yeah, in the introductory remarks, this motherfucker is talking about breeding us like animals. I gotta stop saying motherfucker, because I recently learned where that word came from, and I don't want to keep saying it, but I keep saying it. Okay. So, fucking, yeah, this dipshit is talking about breeding us and comparing us to breeding. And then he's saying basically, like, he doesn't want deaf people to exist, and to what extent is the human race susceptible of variation by selection if animals are. So that was his introduction. Then in chapter 1 is called Upon the Materials for the Formation of a Deaf Variety of the Human Race at Present Existing in America. And this is where he kind of realizes that we all have the same last names and all of that fucking shit. But this is also where he's saying that those who believe that he does would realize that we are like defective and calamitous and bad for the human race and all of that shit. And then in chapter 2 is called Marriages of the Deaf. And in this one, he literally just breaks it down and goes into which deaf are marrying each other and how are they getting married and why are they getting married. And then in chapter 3, he calls it deaf mute offspring of deaf mute marriages. And this fucking shit, he's literally just like, oh shit, deaf people are alive. they actually love each other and holy fuck, they're having kids. What will we do? What will we do if deaf people just fucking exist? And that's the whole point of chapter 1 through 3. That's kind of the direction he takes it. But then notice that he publishes a letter in which he is saying, in regards to the marriages of deaf mutes with each other, there is very great danger, I should say probability, that some of the offspring will be born deaf. What's the fucking danger? What is the danger? Um, I know. Thank you for telling me I'm doing great. This shit is wild. I appreciate you, Bohedi. I'm glad you're here. And dude, oh wait, you haven't even seen. You're gonna see this shit. You haven't even. I don't know if you saw this, but in chapter 5, he's talking about families of deaf mutes. That's whatever. He's doing our fucking family trees again, and looking at who, whether or not someone's congenitally deaf, born deaf, or gets deaf later in life, or hearing, and whether or not they have deaf kids, blah blah blah. And he realizes that most deaf people are born to hearing people, but he still thinks deaf people shouldn't have kids to form a deaf race, which is hypocritical. Like, he contradicts himself. And in chapter 5, he calls that upon the growth of the deaf mute population. And that's literally just, he's showing like all these graphs about deaf people existing and our population size. And he literally says at the end that he needs to compare this to the population at large. And I think he's literally afraid that there might be more deaf than hearing people growing. And then in chapter 6, he fucking calls this shit upon the causes that determine the selection of the deaf by the deaf in marriage. And this fucking shit, dude, it's absurd. So he literally says, hold on. Yeah. Those who believe as I do that the production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriages of the deaf with the object of applying a remedy. And that statement is so fucked up. And that's what all academia and what all deafness is stems from. The commenter, he even corrected himself by saying, I should say probability, as if he acknowledges his prejudice but doesn't care to make it known. Right! That's another contradiction. He contradicts himself so much in this fucking shit. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And then, bro, this conclusion. In the fucking conclusion, he's basically starts saying, where it at? Oh, before we even get to the conclusion, he's all like, so let's consider what makes deaf people successful. And then he makes a list of what he thinks makes deaf people successful. And then he basically says, after all of that, what remedial measures can be taken to lessen or check the tendency of a deaf race, the tendency for the formation of a deaf variety of the human race in America? We shall consider the subject under 2 heads: repressive, preventative measures. Repressive measures, in that he says, for instance, a law forbidding congenitally deaf persons from intermarrying would go a long way towards checking the evil. And then he basically also says, our search for such measures, preventative measures, we shall be guided by the following principle. Determine the causes that promote intermarriage among the deaf and remove them. And then if you look at item number 6 right here, or is it, no, there's 2. There's This is this one right here. He says, another and very powerful method of obstructing intercourse with hearing persons and compelling deaf mutes to associate exclusively with one another would be to disseminate throughout the community incorrect ideas concerning the deaf and dumb so that people should avoid and even fear them. And all this ties into the root of how hearing people control all information on deaf people and how hearing people don't listen to deaf people when we try to correct hearing people. It all stems from this. Most information on deafness is controlled by hearing people. Hearing people, most of what they learn from deafness is from Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell said, in order to obstruct intercourse with hearing and deaf people, we should disseminate throughout the community incorrect ideas concerning the deaf and dumb so that people should avoid and even fear them. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. Yep. And fucking, yeah. So then in conclusion, he's talking about the repressive and preventative measures. And then he ends this shit with talking about finances. He's talking about how much money he can make by fucking with deaf people. Which proves like this is all along just about money. This is capitalism. And then he ends this all thing. He says, I showed you guys that deaf people are living, they're successful, they're having a good time, they're alive. And he needs all this, the whole scientific men's attention to counteract the formation of deaf race. He's like, deaf people are surviving. I need everybody to fucking stop it. We've got to stop deaf people from being alive, is what the fuck he was basically saying. And that is the entire fucking memoir in a nutshell. And so if I'm in keeping, at the beginning, I tried to do this little bit because I wish I was like as cool as like Keith Lee, but I'm not. But I was just all like, all right, we've got this book. I got it. Let's try it. Let's rate it 1 to 10. 0. I rate you a 0. I rate you a negative infinity. This shit is so messed up. This bitch is so messed up. It's like, fuck you, Alexander Graham Bell. Go to hell. I'll see you in hell. We're gonna have a fight. I cannot wait to die to make it to the afterlife. I have a hit list of people I'm going after in the afterlife, And a lot of people in my family tree are on that list. I'm coming for them bitches. But Alexander Graham Bell, when I get to the afterlife, me and him are going to fight. It's going to be like Peter Griffin and that chicken. You know what I mean? That's going to be me and Alexander Graham Bell. But this is the end of the book. Thank you so much for being here. That means just like a lot to me. The last time I did this and I ended, I was trying to roll my my ending, but I forgot that there was a delay, and so I ended the live before my stream ended because I forgot about the delay. So I'm hoping I remember this time. But thank you so much for coming and for being here. Bohidi, I'm about to text you. And yeah, no, it means a lot. I really appreciate you. And I hope you have a great day. Alexander Graham Bell can go to hell. You know what? Let's just do that buffer real quick. What the hell? Alexander Graham Bell. It deserved it. He deserves it one more time for the entire fucking book. I had to do it one more time.